Chapter 51. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After a solid night's sleep, the still tipsy Kairaku Shunsui handed Uehara Shiraha a letter and a contract. This is a letter of apology and a gift from the Iwama family. Iwama? Uehara Shiraha didn't recognize the name. Kairaku Shunsui explained, Iwama now, the guy who hassled you before, is one of them. The Iwama clan is a minor branch of the Tsunyashiro family, which is how Iwama now ended up guarding them. The Tsunyashiro family is trying to get on your good side. Kairaku Shunsui knew exactly how these big families operated. He'd seen them cause trouble for the Tsunyashiro clan for years. He doubted Iwama now would have bothered the 1st Division's 7th seat without someone pulling the strings. Alright, Uehara Shiraha shrugged. He'd almost forgotten the incident. Iwama Naoya and those 2 soldiers had been frozen solid. Uehara Shiraha hadn't given the insignificant nobody a second thought. He opened the letter first. The head of the Iwama family apologized for Iwama Naoya's misconduct, claiming it was all Naoya's personal screw-up and had nothing to do with the Iwama family or the Tsunyashiro clan. Same old song and dance. Regular employees can't be at fault, so it must be the temps. Some things never change, but Uehara Shiraha didn't sweat it. Whether the Tsunyashiro family was behind it or not, as long as the threat was gone, he was good. He wasn't a judge looking for the truth, he just needed to make sure these people couldn't come after him. That's why he'd iced a member of the Tsunyashiro main family, to throw them off the scent. The little bit of property from the Iwama family was peanuts, barely enough to keep a beggar alive. He was a high roller, after all. The red light district was a money pit, and he knew how to live it up, spending cash like water. But money was no problem for the rich. If he needed more, he'd just get it. Seeing Uehara Shiraha's dismissive look, Kairaku Shunsui smiled and poured them both a glass of wine. He'd expected this. These bigwigs thought they could buy off his protege with chump change. Wishful thinking, Uehara Shiraha didn't waste words. He raised his glass to Kairaku Shunsui, downed it in one gulp, and said, I think Siriidii should have some backup in Hueco Mundo. I'm thinking of putting some work into that base. No problem, I'll help where I can. Kairaku Shunsui got his drift immediately. He thought Uehara Shiraha's idea was solid. Seoul society had been too hands-off with Hueco Mundo and needed to be more vigilant. Otherwise, they'd be caught flat-footed if something went down. Sadly, the brass upstairs were blind, arrogant, and corrupt, unable to see the obvious flaws, or just not caring. With a few words, they finalized the Hueco Mundo plan, then got back to drinking and carousing. The next day, Uehara Shiraha knocked out his daily tasks, snagged 2 attribute points, and felt pretty good. Then, he proposed opening a talent training base for Soul Ryokoto in Hueco Mundo, suggesting all Shinigami grads take a tour. He figured it could unlock their potential and boost the overall strength of the new recruits. After that, Uehara Shiraha and Ise Nanao started building the Hueco Mundo base, mostly just messing with the barrier and hiding stuff. With his limited resources, he couldn't do much. Uehara Shiraha wasn't expecting to conquer Hueco Mundo with this base. A few days later, the 46th room rejected Uehara Shiraha's proposal, calling it outlandish. But they didn't rush to pull the manpower and supplies from the Hueco Mundo base. Uehara Shiraha didn't mind. He'd gotten what he wanted. With Captain Commander Yamamoto and Kairaku Shunsui on his side, he could get away with almost anything. Plus, the base let him keep an eye on Hueco Mundo and track Aizen's Arrancar experiments. A crescent moon hung in the sky, illuminating the ugly, run-down Hueco Palace. Bailargan, the self-proclaimed king of Hueco Mundo, in a black robe and gold crown, tilted his head and looked at his achukas, wondering, where did Valdez and the others go? Why aren't they here to kiss the ring? A subordinate Daxu replied respectfully, Lord Valdez followed your orders to take out that noisy Soul Reaper. He hasn't returned yet. Trash. Bailargan wondered if he needed to beef up his crew. They were getting more useless by the day, a real disappointment. He needed to thin the herd. Too bad Harabel didn't appreciate his greatness, otherwise he wouldn't be stuck with these losers. Just then, 3 ordinary humans appeared in the palace of Kion, standing before Bailargan in Death Tyrant suits. Facing the Hollows and Bailargan, they seemed calm and collected. The Achukas were stunned. How did these guys even get in? The leading humanoid Achuka snapped to and shouted, "Who are you? How dare you trespass in the palace of Kion?" One of the men, dressed as a blind man, swung his blade and took out the Achuka in one hit. The Hollows gasped and instinctively took a step back. The black dude with sunglasses, dreadlocks, and dark skin stunned them all with one move. The dapper guy with glasses stayed cool. The silver-haired kid at the back just smiled. The place went silent, but Hollows aren't known for their brains. After a moment, the ghostly-faced Hollows surrounded the 3. Looking ready to kill. Then, the king of Hueco Mundo, Bailargan, spoke coldly, "You all, stand down. I'm bored. I'll amuse myself with them." He looked at the 3 with disdain. "Judging by the clothes, you must be soul reapers. If you're here, Valdez must have failed. You're all failures. So, what's your purpose?" Without having lived for centuries, he didn't take the 3 ants seriously. Bailargan was curious. The 3 soul reapers showed no intent to kill. What were they doing here? The bespectacled man spoke gently, "Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Aizen Sosuke. I'm curious, Your Excellency, the King of Hueco Mundo, are you satisfied with things as they are?" That with his power, he could have crushed Hueco Mundo long ago. But even with 99% certainty, Aizen was cautious, never underestimating his opponents. The Hueco Mundo Expeditionary Forces operation had gone well, providing Aizen with plenty of intel. That's why he brought Ikemara Jin and Tozen to attack the Kyonya Palace. Aizen raised his Zanpakuto, pointed the tip at the ground, and whispered, "Shatter, Kyoka Suijetsu." Invisible ripples spread, like water shattering. The Hollows were confused, not understanding what was happening. "What do you mean?" Bailargan didn't try to stop him. He still saw the 3 soul reapers as clowns. Facing Bailargan's dismissive face, Aizen said calmly, "Your power and strength would be valuable in my plan. If you agree, I'll grant you the power to evolve to a higher level. A whole new world awaits you in Hueco Mundo." "Ridiculous. I'm tired of you stupid soul reapers." Bailargan picked up a huge double-bladed axe, turned, and walked to the 3, shouting, "I am the king of Hueco Mundo. I decide whether Hueco Mundo changes or not. I, the king of Hueco Mundo, Bailargan, am the only one who can change the world." He swung the axe and chopped the 3 soul reapers into pieces, but Bailargan, in his murderous rage, never imagined this would be the last hurrah of his life, and a fake one at that. Bailargan sneered at the 3 weak soul reapers. "You said you'd let me evolve and see a whole new world. Big talk, but is that all you've got? How boring. Really?" A familiar, gentle voice spoke. Aizen, Ikemara Jin, and Tozen Kaname, who he'd just cut into pieces, reappeared unharmed, looking at Bailargan like he was a clown. "Impossible, I just clearly." Bailargan was losing it. Seeing Bailargan's growing frustration, a flicker of disappointment crossed Aizen's eyes. He waved his hand. "This is the world you're in." The scene before Bailargan changed. The palace was filled with broken fingers and debris. His adoring subordinates were dead. Before him was a hellscape of blood and corpses. "How dare you mock me, you old Sai!" Horrified and enraged by the scene of the hellish Shuya Palace, Bailargan lost it. Standing before the bone throne, Bailargan unleashed a terrifying spiritual pressure. He waved a bony hand, and a black aura enveloped Aizen. The ominous aura annihilated everything in its path. Rocks and sand turned to dust, the corpses of the great hollows on the ground turned to bones and then dissolved. It was as if an invisible hand was wiping everything away. "So, that's the king of Hueco Mundo." Ikemara Jin's eyes widened slightly, looking serious. Tozen Kaname stood silently before Aizen, a dark expression on his face. Aizen said calmly, "The power of aging? Interesting, but sadly." He waved his hand, and the scene changed again. The black aura dissipated, leaving a smooth pit in the ground. Beilergen's eye sockets trembled, the scene that had seemed so real had been fake. What was real, and what was fake? He couldn't tell. In despair, Beilergen unleashed the power of aging again, trying to force the Soul Reaper out. Enough. This is getting pathetic. Aizen burst with spiritual pressure, a beam of golden light shot into the sky, the terrifying power shook the Soul King Palace, distorting the spirit particles and surrounding buildings. The aging aura couldn't advance an inch against Aizen's spiritual pressure, gradually dissipating. This spiritual pressure. Beilergen's jaw almost dropped. The only way to block the power of aging was with stronger spiritual pressure, but that was impossible. He was Beilergen Rubanson, the king of Hueco Mundo, a king for countless years. No one could have more spiritual pressure than him, but the scene before him defied logic. As Beilergen gaped, Ikamaru Jin and Tozen flashed in, blocking his vitals with their Zanpakuto. Beilergen realized he'd lost. Broken, he lowered his head, his kingly spirit crushed. Since Hueco Mundo is ours, let's proceed according to plan and transform it. Aizen glanced with disdain at the crumbling Hueco Mundo palace, king of Hueco Mundo. A joke. While Aizen was developing Hueco Mundo and experimenting on Arancars, Hakuha Uehara was plotting to get his slice. Some of the Hueco Mundo ores and specialties were quite valuable, especially the Great Hollows. And soon, the Arancars and even the Espada would be part of the Hueco Mundo Expeditionary Force Headquarters luxury package. For Hakuha Uehara, with the Hueco Mundo crossing gate, this was a monopoly. 2 weeks later, a one-sided battle was ending near the inner circle of Hueco Mundo. Hueco Mundo was divided into the inner circle, outer circle, and underground Great Hollow Forest. The inner circle was home to the Hueco Mundo Palace. The closer to the palace, the stronger the hollows and Great Hollows. Hakuha Uehara's base was on the outer edge, which the palace didn't care about, but sometimes, Hakuha Uehara would sneak to the inner circle to hunt. Looking at the Great Hollows, he swung Dankong again. Several Yachukas were frozen into huge ice blocks. He was using the power of his stand, the White Album, with Dankong as a cover. The extreme cold froze the hollows and affected Mayuri Kuratsuchi, who was wearing his black and white mask. Unfazed, Mayuri Kuratsuchi scoffed as flames erupted around him, fighting off the cold. Surrounded by flames, Kuratsuchi stared at Uehara Baiyu with cold, golden eyes. The temperature dropped again. Uehara Baiyu took back Dankong and said, "Captain Kuratsuchi Mayuri, we have the research materials you requested. Our deal is done. Now it's your turn to make good on your promise." Uehara Shiraha needed Kuratsuchi Mayuri's help to fully control the Hueco Mundo base and the gate. He knew the Frankenstein had some interesting things in his bag of tricks. And Kuratsuchi Mayuri wasn't one to follow the rules, so they could work together. That's why Uehara Shiraha reached out. "Did you just include me in your attack range?" Mayuri's eyes shone with curiosity and excitement. If he hadn't prepared, he would have been frozen like those hollows. But why couldn't he get any spiritual pressure samples, and why couldn't he be sealed by the barrier? The medicine didn't seem to work on this guy. He and his Zanpakuto would be the perfect experimental material. Chapter 52. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Uehara Baiyu arched an eyebrow. Didn't that drug you just used on the hollows target me too? That he was well aware that without adequate strength or countermeasures, partnering with a maniac like Kuratsuchi Mayuri was like asking for trouble. So, Uehara Baiyu had been wary of him from the start. Kuratsuchi Mayuri's various tailor-made, unstoppable drugs were nothing compared to the horse talisman. A third-seat officer actually daring to disrespect the captain. Kuratsuchi Mayuri's expression darkened. Given his nature, he would have turned Uehara into an experimental subject, or at least put him on the operating table for research, but he hadn't expected his carefully researched medicine to be shrugged off. It was an outright insult. Uehara remained unfazed. "I'm eager to see what the captain of the 12th Division can do, or should I say, acting captain." He was about to witness the debut of a Soul Reaper Bankai, performed by Kuratsuchi Mayuri, and then see it get trashed by Ishida Yuryu, fresh out of newbie training. What was there to fear? Humph. You asked for it. Kuratsuchi Mayuri scoffed and slowly turned his attention to the frozen hollow. He always delivered on his side of a deal. In that regard, Kuratsuchi Mayuri remained a professional. Plus, he wasn't ready to give up on Uehara, who knew that hollows and Hueco Mundo, overlooked by the big shots, actually possessed so many valuable resources. Uehara shrugged, saying nothing. With Kuratsuchi Mayuri and the Research and Development Department's support, the Soul Society's portal to the human world was secure. As long as Aizen didn't get his hands on the royal key or the Hogyoku, there was no way he could attack this base. This was the perfect time for development, and Uehara intended to keep a low profile, quietly leveling up. But to prevent those annoying nobles from causing trouble, Uehara decided to stir things up first, under a disguise. That night, in the Tsunoyashiro family's main residence, the imposing Tsunoyashiro Tokunada looked up sharply. How did you bypass the murderous stone barrier? That the murderous stone wasn't just hard, its invisible waves created a circular barrier that blocked spiritual energy. The barrier surrounding the Soul Society was based on the same principle. As head of the 5 noble families, the Tsunoyashiro clan certainly had access to that technology, and now, this masked man had waltzed right in. His elite guards were strewn on the floor behind him. Uehara, wearing an Obito mask with tiger stripes, spoke calmly. Head of the Tsunoyashiro family, rest assured, I'm not here to kill you, I'm here as an envoy, to negotiate peace. Tsunoyashiro Tokunada reacted quickly, recalling the recent mysterious death of a clan member. You're from the Shihoin family. You have some nerve. You murder our people, then dare to show your face. We, the Tsunoyashiro family, are the leaders of the 5 great noble houses. We are the history of the Soul Society. If that's what you think, Uehara said, completely unimpressed by the 5 noble families and the Tsunoyashiro name. But if you 2 ancient houses keep fighting, you'll only become laughingstocks. Why not work together to eliminate the smaller families, then divvy up their seats in the Central 46? The seat goes to whoever contributes the most. In Uehara's eyes, there were too many nobles in the Soul Society. These corrupt parasites deserve to be wiped out. In the entire Soul Society, there is only one person who enjoys but does not work. Tsunoyashiro Tokunada's eyes flickered. The Central 46 is just a tool for managing the Godai 13. I have no use for those seats. Neither the Soul Reapers nor the lesser nobles were worth his consideration. Really? Uehara chuckled. If they were so unimportant, why are your family members joining the Godai 13, and seducing Soul Reapers from the Rukongai district? The original Godai 13 was entirely without members of the Tsunoyashiro family. The Godai 13 had become increasingly powerful, and the Tsunoyashiro family had undoubtedly wanted a piece of the action. Otherwise, those who claimed such noble blood wouldn't have allowed Tsunoyashiro Tokunada to join the Spiritual Arts Academy, and collaborate on experiments combining nobles with Rukongai commoners. This led to the marriage of Uehara to Tsunoyashiro Tokunada, and then 2 people went crazy. One was Tsunoyashiro Tokunada, who killed his wife. The other was Tozen Kaname, who lost his best friend. Tsunoyashiro Tokunada, stung by the words, took a deep breath to regain his composure. As the head of the 5 great noble houses, he wouldn't allow himself to lose face in front of such scum. Uehara changed the subject. The Jigaku clan guards hell, the Shiba family lives in self-exile, and the Kachiki hold on to the 6th division. The Shihoin family has no interest in power struggles and will support you making a difference. If you, the head of the Tsunoyashiro family, can't seize this opportunity, you're useless. Don't forget, it was your ancestors who assassinated the Soul King, paving the way for the world we know today. Tsunoyashiro Tokunada, don't disgrace your ancestors. The Tsunoyashiro family was full of ambitious people who would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. Now, Uehara had given them an opportunity to let loose, and those who were only afraid of chaos in the world would undoubtedly seize it. Uehara didn't care what happened to those nobles, he just wanted to watch the blood flow. After a moment of thought, Tsunoyashiro Tokunada agreed to Uehara's proposal, but he only pretended to agree. He had his own plans. Uehara knew it, but didn't care. Once the train leaves the station, it's not easy to stop it, and one can only move forward along the laid track. Having dealt with Tsunoyashiro Tokunada, Uehara met Shihoin Yoruchi as planned. After a little convincing, Shihoin Yoruchi was fooled. With the token she provided, Uehara found the gullible Shihoin Yashiro. It was even easier this time because Yashiro lacked the confidence and resolve to become the head of the family. Uehara simply encouraged him and easily won his trust. After a busy day, the pieces were in place. Late that night, at the secret base beneath Sokayaku Hill, Uehara Shiraha enjoyed a relaxing soak in the hot springs. Behind him, Shihoin Yoruchi, wearing cat-ear headphones, massaged his back, watching the blissful Shiraha Uehara. Shihoin Yoruchi burst with anger. Now, are you going to tell me why you're supporting the Tsuneyashiro family's grab for the Central 46? That before, this bastard had given a long speech, confusing her and convincing her to hand over the token. Now that she thought about it, Shihoin Yoruchi wanted to beat the naive self to death. Why did she believe this guy? He had said giving up the interests diverted the attention of the Tsuneyashiro family, so as to save the family and Yashiro, but the problem was that once the Tsuneyashiro family becomes powerful, the situation of the Shifenjuan family will only become more unfavorable. Your service needs work, Uehara began, then stated bluntly, you lack vision. The Tsuneyashiro family is going to dominate regardless. 15 or 30 seats in the Central 46 makes no difference. You could team up with the Kachiki clan to restrain the Tsuneyashiro family in the noble house's council, but you can't stop their underhanded tactics, so, why not voluntarily give up some power? Sacrifice those hopeless lower nobles and build a loyal base of support. Isn't that better than being a shrinking violet? Get it? Applause. Uehara controlled this pair of siblings with ease. Is that so? Shihoin Yoruchi remained skeptical. Are you sure you're not just helping us out of the goodness of your heart? Although this Otsutsuki Naruto's words made sense, she had always known that this guy was a bastard who would not do anything without profit. Shihoin Yoruchi always felt that this guy wanted to cheat people. She just couldn't figure out where this pit was, how deep it was, and whether it would involve the Shifenjuan family. Uehara was well aware of Shihoin Yoruchi's concerns. This girl was finally wising up, and wouldn't be fooled so easily. He didn't try to be mysterious, but comforted her. Rest assured, I won't be working with the Tsuneyashiro family or Aizen. One is too reckless, backstabbing even the Soul King. The other's too smart to trick. The Shihoin family and Shihoin Yoruchi had already boarded his pirate ship. Even if they realized something was wrong, they couldn't jump off. Then I should thank you, Shihoin Yoruchi said. She understood he was implying she was stupid, but at this point, she had no choice but to play along. This guy was too crafty. Everyone already assumed the Shihoin family and this guy were in cahoots. She shouldn't have made a deal with him. She was completely trapped. Was that part of his plan? Ignoring the increasingly paranoid Miss Shihoin, Uehara enjoyed the massage. Now that the pieces were set, he didn't have to worry about Shihoin Yoruchi and Uehara Kisuke causing any trouble. Unexpected incident, he could just develop silently and steadily. Everything unfolded as Uehara had anticipated. The Tsuneyashiro family started taking the initiative in the noble infighting, preparing to eliminate dissenters and seize seats in the Central 46. The Kachiki family couldn't stand alone against the Tsuneyashiro, and could only watch them grow stronger. The Tsuneyashiro family went completely off the rails, even slaughtering Foolbringers in the human world for Soul King fragments, blaming the innocent substitute Soul Reaper, Jinjo Kugo. At the same time, Tsuneyashiro Tokunada, who was under house arrest, also made small moves and took the opportunity to gather a group of troops. Uehara played both sides under various identities, reaping the benefits in secret and in plain sight. As Aizen took over the inner circle of Hueco Mundo, Uehara created a court army outside Hueco Mundo. He officially became the first commander-in-chief of this semi-independent armed force, with help from Kairaku Shunsui and the support of the commander-general. Uehara kept a firm grip on the Hueco Mundo base and the court army. Of course, this was just as casual. He did what he wanted in order to better enjoy life and grow stronger. After all, in the world of death, all power and fame are just floating clouds. Only strength is the most real reliance, and Uehara hadn't forgotten Aizen's espada in Hueco Mundo. The monks in the sky were secretly planning, and the Invisible Empire army in the shadows was getting ready. So, while enjoying life, he was also completing tasks and silently getting stronger. 50 years passed. In the luxurious private room of the court army's commander-in-chief, a system notification startled Uehara. Ding. Congratulations to the host for completing the special mission, 12, awakening the true name of Zanpakuto, developing the second stage Bankai, and being rewarded with the Soul Gem, SR level item. Mind Gem, level, SR, type, Infinity Gem, ability, read dominate, invade, modify, create all mental consciousness and enhance one's own mental power. Introduction. 1. One of the 6 oldest and most powerful Infinity Stones in the Marvel main universe, one of the 563 points of the universe. Gathering 6 Infinity Stones can realize any wish. Point 2. The host completes, Special Mission 12 Zanpakuto True Name Awakening, developing second stage Bankai, to obtain. Point 3. Please do not aim at Heart of Steel. Uehara was pleasantly surprised. He had finally caught a lucky break. It wasn't an SR level ability, but it was at least his first SR level item. Without hesitation, he activated Universal Barrier, to ensure no one could see what was happening. Then, Uehara turned his right hand over, revealing an oval yellow gem. The pigeon egg-sized mind gem pulsed with a faint yellow light. Just looking at it, it was hard to believe this was a single universe-level treasure. Uehara carefully sent the mind gem into the broken space while opening the character panel again to check. Name, Uehara Shiraha, position, 3rd seat of the 1st Division, Chief of the Imperial Army, spiritual pressure, 2nd class spiritual power, Zanpakuto, Danku, 9th stage Bankai, slashing technique, advanced captain level, white fighting, advanced captain level, Kido, 1000-year captain level, instant step, 1000-year captain level, abilities. Point 1. Shadow Clone Technique, B-class ability, perfect. Point 2. Stand, White Album, S-class ability, perfect. Point 3. Breathing Technique, Sun Breathing, B-class ability, perfect. Point 4. Angel Power, Universal Barrier, S-class ability, perfect. Point 5. Magic Moves, 7 Flashes, A-class ability, great success, items. Point 1. Disguise Glasses, B-class item, Kryptonian creation. Point 2. Death Gloves, A item, extraordinary creation. Point 3. Horse Charm, A item, magical creation. Point 4. Three-dimensional maneuvering device, D-class item, technological creation. Point 5. Black Ball Battle Suit, B-class item, technological creation. Point 6. Soul Gem, SR, Infinity Gem. Uehara smirked at the panel. This asterisk was called Invincible. This panel was great. With this and his full suite of maxed-out abilities, he could easily hold his own against Aizen. Now, he could do whatever he wanted. It was worth working hard to complete tasks on top of eating, drinking, and having fun for 50 years. In Bleach, strength was divided into captain level, senior captain level, 1000-year captain level, transcendent level, pseudo-spirit king level, and spirit king level. Kensei Muguruma, who doesn't like wasting other people's time, was a standard captain-level gatekeeper. Senior captains had typically served for centuries, and had reached their limit in every aspect, but lacked talent or resources to progress further. Chojiro Suzuki and Byakuya Kachiki, who evolved from the Soul King Palace, are at the senior captain level. The limit of the Shinigami race is the 1000-year captain. Generally, even if the talent is sufficient, it takes 1,000 years of accumulation to have the opportunity to be promoted to this level. Thanks to his maxed-out, White Album, Uehara was now a senior captain. Chapter 53. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As for the surprise of SR's Soul Gem, it instantly boosted Uehara Shiraha's potential. With some development, items like that could reach transcendent levels. Squad 0, Perfect Bodyguard, and Blood Blue were all transcendent. Soul King Ha and Double Sword Bankai Ichigo were considered pseudo-Soul King level. Uehara Shiraha's raw power was still far from that. But the 1000-year Blood War was still 30+ years away. Daily tasks could boost his stats a lot, and the plot would unlock special missions. So, blowing past the Holy Bodyguard wasn't just possible, it'd be a walk in the park. Now that's a relief. Thinking this, Uehara Shiraha grinned at his task log. First, the daily task summary. Completed 25,263 daily tasks, earning 50,526 random attribute points. Next, the special task summary. Point 1. Completed, special task 1, visit Rukongai, rewarded with Shadow Clone, B-level ability. Point 10. Completed, special mission 10, become Chief of the Imperial Army, rewarded with 7, three-dimensional maneuvering devices, D-Class Items, Point 11. Completed, Special Mission 11, recruit Momo Hinamori and Rukia as apprentices, rewarded with 10, Black Ball Combat Suits, B-Class Items, Point 12. Completed, Special Mission 12, Awakens Zanpakuto's true name develop second stage Bankai, rewarded with, Mind Gem, SR Item. Shiraha Uehara only got 3 special missions in the past 50 years, and the first 2 rewards sucked. The Black Ball Combat Suits had some use. Shihoin Yoruchi and Matsumoto Ranjaku looked great in them, plus, short of a top captain, nobody was breaking that defense in one hit. It was a one-time get-out-of-jail-free card. Gotta hand it to the multifaceted star. She knew her audience. Beauties in those black suits were doubly tempting. The curves were exactly where they should be, highlighting every S-shape. Even a serious guy like Uehara Shiraha had a hard time resisting. But she knew men too well. Shihoin Yoruchi and Matsumoto Ranjaku, those 2 old pros, were game. They'd occasionally slip into the suits and roleplay with Uehara Shiraha, testing the material's elasticity. But the 3 younger apprentices, Ise Nanao, Hinamori Momo, and Rukia, just blushed and refused, calling it too embarrassing. Peach God didn't need the suit anyway. Why would she care about the strongest shield that Aizen and 6 captains combined couldn't break? As for the 3-dimensional maneuvering devices he got for becoming chief of the Imperial Army, Uehara Shiraha had no clue what they were for. Was he supposed to send his soldiers to slice Killian necks? Eren Yeager from Attack on Titan might love it, but this thing wasn't worth dirt, not compared to Flash Step, complete garbage. Uehara Shiraha chucked it into his inventory and forgot about it. Luckily, those 2 useless rewards were just filler. Even if the other rewards were weak and special missions were rare, the Mind Gem made up for everything. Staring at the Mind Gem pulsing with power, Uehara Shiraha thought happily. In the next 50 years, I'll grind 100,000 attribute points and a few more special missions so I can coast through the 1,000-year blood war. Back at the Imperial Army headquarters, Uehara Shiraha felt a familiar spiritual pressure approach. A young female subordinate walked in, bowing respectfully. Commander, Captain Kairaku Shunsui of the 8th Division is here to see you. Got it. Uehara Shiraha nodded. Wearing a bamboo hat and pink kimono, Kairaku Shunsui strolled in, looking impressed. Still over the top every time I come here. Nobody had believed in the Hueco Mundo base or the Imperial Army at first, not even Kairaku Shunsui, but he'd supported Uehara Shiraha anyway. At least it saved his own squad some money. Who knew Uehara Shiraha would actually build a powerhouse army out of nothing? How'd he pull that off? Small potatoes. Uehara Shiraha didn't take his status seriously. Not evening yet. You're here, 'cause the old man sent you, right? That the 3rd seat of Squad 1 and chief of the Imperial Army outranked any captain. Nobody could order him around. Hee, this time it's good news. Kairaku Shunsui wore a wait, till you hear this expression. Let's go, don't keep waiting. He came personally to deliver the news, just to see Uehara Shiraha's reaction. Uehara Shiraha didn't need to see his face to know it wasn't good, probably minor, though. He didn't care. He was feeling good today, so a little trouble was fine. Wearing a moon-white Haori over his black shihakusho, Uehara Shiraha walked out calmly. The shihakusho marked him as a soul reaper. The moon-white Haori showed his rank as chief of the Imperial Army. Regular Imperial Army soldiers wore moon-white emblems on their shihakusho. They watched their young commander with admiration, their eyes sparkling. Uehara Shiraha was used to it. As they walked, Uehara Shiraha and Kairaku Shunsui chatted about the latest teas at the Pleasure District. They were old hands in that scene, with plenty in common. Ise Nanao, the Imperial Army's vice-commander, always complained that Kairaku Shunsui was a bad influence. Kairaku Shunsui felt wronged. For all Nanao knew, Uehara Shiraha was the bad influence, but Ise Nanao was basically the vice-captain of the 8th Division now, focused on Uehara Shiraha's work. She sided with Uehara Shiraha. Kairaku Shunsui just had to take it. They flash-stepped to the captain's office. As they entered the spacious hall, Uehara Shiraha drew attention. Glancing around, he saw mostly familiar faces. The old man in front was still napping, perfectly still. Captain Soi Fong of the 2nd Division, Madame Rong 2.0, Captain Yunohana Retsu of the 4th Division, the 1st Kenpachi, Captain Aizen Sosuke of the 5th Division, Mr. Siriidei, Captain Kamamura Sajin of the 7th Division, Captain Tozen Kaname of the 9th Division, Blind Monk, Quisanti Edition, Captain Shiba Ishin of the 10th Division, Future Triple Dad, Captain Zaraki Kenpachi of the 11th Division, Berserker Zoro. Captain Kuratsuchi Mayuri of the 12th Division, Father of the Year. Captain Yukitake Jushiro of the 13th Division was absent in spirit. As usual, Shiroha Uehara also saw the cold Byakuya Kachiki and the sly Jin Ikamaru. He knew they were today's main event. At this point in the timeline, Hisagi Shuhei had failed the captain's exam twice and joined the 9th Division. Meeting his second mentor, Tozen Kaname, Aizen had recruited Kira Izuru, Abarai Renji, and Hinamori Momo to the 5th Division years ago. After gaslighting the 1st Division, he realized Renji was unruly, so he dumped the redhead in the 11th Division. After years of prep, Aizen figured Kira Izuru and Hinamori Momo were ready, so he recommended Ikamaru Jin as the captain of the 3rd Division. Today was the day to test Ikamaru Jin. Uehara Shiraha knew Yamamoto Genryosai Shigekuni's plan, same old song and dance, put him on the spot, expecting him to perform. Uehara Shiraha wasn't worried. Real gold fears no fire. Seeing Uehara Shiraha, so calm and handsome, some captains felt uneasy. Uehara Shiraha was only a 3rd seat, even if they were captains, but they knew he was strong, maybe stronger than them. Plus, as chief of the Imperial Army, his rank was practically the same as the captain commander. The captains might not care about power, but the freedom was enviable. They worked every day, bound by rules. Uehara Shiraha ate, drank, and had fun, freely visiting secret Soul Society locations and even Hueco Mundo. No work, plenty of pay. Kairaku Shuansue's dream life. Most captains didn't know why the nobles let Uehara Shiraha get away with it. Only Mayuri Kuratsuchi, Shunsui Kairaku, and Aizen had a clue. Yamamoto Genryosai Shigekuni suspected it too, but didn't sweat it. Old age made people lazy. Yamamoto Genryosai Shigekuni opened his eyes, glancing at Uehara Shiraha. Chief Uehara, I've called you here to discuss Jin Ikamaru's appointment as captain of the 3rd Division. I think it's only fair that you be the examiner. Do you agree? No objection. Catching up with old classmates. What else could Uehara Shiraha say? Kuchiki Byakuya stepped forward, his face cold. Captain Commander, Chief Uehara, I've just become captain of the 6th Division. I want to take the test too, to prove myself. As the head of the Kuchiki clan, he was expected to inherit the captain's seat, but Kuchiki Byakuya wanted to prove himself and challenge Uehara Shiraha, Soul Society's strongest genius. Zaraki Kenpachi barely contained his bloodlust. He glared at Uehara Shiraha with his one blood-red eye. I doubt Uehara Shiraha's ability. I want to challenge him. Only if he beats me will I acknowledge him as an examiner. Chaos erupted. Kairaku Shunsui smirked at the scene. Asshole. It's not a test for you, why so eager? Kuratsuchi Mayuri sneered. Aizen said smoothly, Captain Zaraki, we acknowledge your strength, but Chief Uehara is equally trustworthy. Soifong's face grew colder. Captain Zaraki, watch your words. Are you questioning the captain commander's orders? That she was curious who'd win. Kenpachi Zaraki was wild. I want to kill Uehara Shiraha, or be killed by him. Yamamoto Genryosai Shigekuni closed his eyes again, ignoring the farce. Chief Uehara, your thoughts? I don't mind. One duck or a flock, makes no difference. Uehara Shiraha shrugged. The captains had different reactions to Uehara Shiraha's nonchalance. Zaraki Kenpachi was excited, almost losing control of his spiritual pressure and bloodlust. Kuratsuchi Mayuri remained indifferent, his golden eyes calm. The others were curious. Uehara Shiraha's performance in Hueco Mundo had made him a legend in Soul Society. He was the strongest genius ever. Even though Hakuba Uehara had been low-key for decades, his genius was more famous than Toshiro Hitsugaya, the prodigy of the 10th Division. Some captains wondered if Hakuba Uehara was as strong as people said. Nobody had seen him fight, he hadn't shown extraordinary talent at the academy. Over the years, Hakuba Uehara lived the high life. He was Soul Society's heartthrob and a master of leisure, envied by every male Soul Reaper. When he wasn't training, Hakuba Uehara did everything else: fishing, painting, calligraphy, music, carving. Even if he was strong before, how much could he have retained? Could he keep up with their progress? Soi Fong agreed with this sentiment. Uehara Shiraha's performance in Hueco Mundo decades ago had felt hopeless. She thought she'd never surpass him, but she'd trained hard and fought on the front lines. Uehara Shiraha had been partying and doing nothing. She thought she'd surpassed him. Captains gathered at training ground number 1, with different ideas. Other than the captains, there were no other witnesses. When the captains fought all out and activated Bankai, their spiritual pressure was so intense that even vice-captains couldn't handle it. Soul Reapers below the rank of captain couldn't watch up close. This ensured that Bankai information wouldn't leak. Kairaku Shunsui checked the barriers. Solid. The spiritual pressure won't leak. Kuratsuchi Mayuri scoffed. Of course. I reinforced them. Several captains couldn't break it. Really? Shiba Ishin wanted to try, but thought better of it. Uehara Shiraha and Ikamaru Jin stood across from each other in the arena, surrounded by barriers. Jin, long time no see. Uehara Shiraha said. Ikamaru Jin narrowed his eyes, sighing. Didn't expect us to fight like this. I heard you killed Wax decades ago. Impressive. I'm ashamed I graduated early. Jin, don't sell yourself short. Uehara Shiraha said. The fruit on the tree hangs longer than a weed seed, but the former grows into a giant, while the latter. He glanced at Ikamaru Jin, hitting him where it hurt. Yeah, I envy you sometimes. Ikamaru Jin's voice was barely audible. His snake-like face grew cold. Chapter 54. You are listening at novelfull.audio. He radiated danger, gripping the knife hilt in his right hand. Shoot him, magic gun. A flash of silver, and Ikamaru Jin's short, dagger-like Zanpakuto shot out like lightning. That was close, almost got his throat pierced. Uehara Shiraha casually touched the tip of the extended blade with one finger. Jin's Zanpakuto had crossed a huge distance instantly. Rock debris trickled down where the blade had passed. The force of Jin's thrust blasted the surface of the arena stone. The speed was incredible, leaving a visible path in the arena. Several captains nodded, acknowledging Jin's skill. Such power and speed in Shirkai was impressive. Not bad. Kenpachi Zaraki admitted, recognizing Jin Ikamaru's strength. The other captains were moved. Hakuha Uehara had blocked Jin Ikamaru's powerful attack with a single finger. The captains now realized that Hakuha Uehara hadn't regressed. He'd become even more of an enigma. Was he a genius? A prodigy? Vice-Captain Ikamaru's Shirkai is outstanding, with power and speed beyond what you'd expect from a vice-captain. Shiba Ishin rubbed his chin, glancing at Uehara Shiraha in amazement. But General Uehara's spiritual pressure and reaction time are even more amazing. You can't achieve this level without overwhelming spiritual pressure. Humph. I thought this would be just a boring brawl by some meathead, but it's proving to be quite interesting. Kuratsuchi Mayuri snorted. He wasn't interested in simple brawls, but Uehara Shiraha's and Ikamaru Jin's techniques were impressive, piquing his interest. Kuratsuchi Mayuri still found Uehara Shiraha's Zanpakuto fascinating. He couldn't figure it out, so he temporarily gave up. Maybe this time he'd get a clue. Aizen said thoughtfully, neither Commander Uehara nor Jin are leaking any spiritual pressure. They're both masters of concealing it. As a master of hiding spiritual pressure himself, he immediately noticed the almost complete absence of fluctuations during their fight. That kind of control wasn't common among Soul Reapers. In the arena, Ikamaru Jin's expression was serious as he looked at the calm Uehara Baiyu. He hadn't expected to defeat Uehara Baiyu with Shirkai, but blocking the Shirkai with a single finger? That was a bit much. Nice showboating, but you're a little light on the power. Like, only a 230 out of a possible 1000. Uehara Baiyu looked relaxed. Jin Ikamaru's serpentine face curled into a cool smile. Yeah, it figures. Shirkai alone isn't going to cut it. He retracted the magic gun, stepped back, pulled his right hand back, and shouted, Bankai, God-killing spear. A terrifying wave of spiritual pressure crashed against the barriers, and the watching captains, sensing the powerful spiritual pressure coming from Uehara Jin, several captains nodded, impressed. He really has achieved captain-level spiritual pressure, and has completed Bankai. So young, yet he possesses third-level spiritual power. A true prodigy. And that Bankai. Uehara Jin confidently swung the Bankai god-killing spear. The stone pillars lining the ring instantly snapped and exploded, the cut surfaces were clean and smooth, and the broken pieces flew back a considerable distance. The Bankai god-killing spear had dozens of times the speed and power of the initial release. Captain Kamamura, did you see it clearly? Soifang asked Kamamura Sajin beside her. Her pupils narrowed. A quick thrust and retraction might be too fast for Soifang to see, but Jin Zanpakuto had just shattered distant stone pillars. It was incredible that she couldn't see the sword-drawing action at that range. Kamamura Sajin shook his head. I didn't see it clearly, but Vice Captain Uehara's Bankai is incredibly fast. The 100 Swords Ryu name is certainly deserved. In its Shirkai, Uehara Jin's spear had an attack range comparable to 100 swords, earning him the title 100 Swords Ryu. The captains hadn't taken that title seriously before. Only with the display of such a potent Bankai did they recall it. Amid the overwhelming spiritual pressure, Uehara Shiraha remained calm. Seeing this, Uehara Jin kindly explained, in Shirkai, my spear can extend about 100 swords length. In Bankai, it extends even further, a full 3 spirit miles, so, relying on speed alone won't let you escape the spear's attack. Wow, sounds amazing. Uehara Shiraha pretended to listen intently. He ignored Jin Uehara's explanation, not taking it to heart. Uehara Shiraha knew the spear's real terror. As the fastest sword, the most frightening thing about the god-killing spear wasn't its impact or range, but its speed. The Shirkai spear already had lightning speed and lethal power. The Bankai was even more dangerous, because the spear no longer needed to extend and retract to attack. Instead, it was similar to Matsumoto Ranjiku's Grey Cat, in which the blade dissipated and filled the entire space before condensing to attack instantly. Its speed was close to teleportation, making it an absolute weapon. A close-range sneak attack might catch even a top captain off guard. Even Aizen, who had fused with the Hogyoku, had been killed by this technique. Without the Hogyoku, Kurosaki Ichigo would have been out of luck. In some ways, it's like an ability based on rules, a one-hit kill. But enough talking. Jin Uehara shrank back slightly, and the short, knife-like, god-killing spear, shot out instantly. The sharp blade was aimed at Uehara Bayu's head, but Uehara Bayu was faster, disappearing the instant Jin Uehara's spiritual pressure condensed. After the attack, Jin Uehara didn't stop, shouting, "Unstoppable blade." Unstoppable is the Bankai's signature move, relying on incredible speed to pierce the enemy. Unstoppable blade is a rapid series of unstoppable thrusts. The spear extended and contracted so quickly that Uehara Bayu was enveloped in a blur of light. Stone pillars and anything else caught in the light were sliced and blasted apart. Dust swirled, obscuring the battlefield. That's incredible. Soifang gasped. Even she, a master of flash step, would have trouble dodging such a widespread, high-speed assault. Soifang's first instinct was to fight Uehara Jin up close to keep the opponent from using the power. The other captains nodded, recognizing Uehara Jin's strength. Achieving Bankai so young qualified him to be the captain of the 3rd Division. Jin, are you taking this too far? Aizen looked worried. Is Commander Uehara alright? Kairaku Shunsui remained calm. Captain Aizen, Brother Bayu will be fine. That's some impressive flash step. Tozen Kaname, wearing sunglasses and dreadlocks, frowned, his expression serious. The captains focused their attention. Uehara Shiraha had already dodged out of Uehara Jin's attack range. Oddly, Uehara Shiraha's movements didn't seem fast. The captains could see them clearly. Compared to the lightning-fast spear, Uehara Shiraha's movement seemed almost slow, yet he dodged every attack, even those that seemed to come from a cannon. It looked like Uehara Jin was deliberately cooperating with Uehara Shiraha, throwing the fight. This is unbelievable. The captains were shocked. Only a flash step master could achieve Uehara Bayu's level of ease. Dodging at the last possible moment required incredible skill and nerves of steel. Soifang clenched her teeth. Uehara Baiyu was still Uehara Baiyu. She was embarrassed by his flash step. Kamamura Sajin asked Tozen, could you dodge that? He knew that although his friend couldn't see, his spiritual perception was amazing and could avoid attacks that ordinary people couldn't. Of course not. Tozen Kaname said helplessly. My spiritual perception can capture the trajectory, but I can't avoid it. The spear was hard to dodge, but Uehara Baiyu's slow, instant step was even harder. It was so powerful that you can't dodge it even if you see it. Kairaku Shunsui was secretly amazed. I don't know how many surprises you're hiding, brother Baiyu. No one noticed the sudden gleam in Aizen's eyes. At the edge of the arena, Kuchiki Byakuya and Kenpachi Zaraki were excited. Hakuha Uehara was nonchalant. Even if the spear managed to hit him once, the universal barrier was there. Of course, he couldn't allow himself to be hit. Even if Jin Ikamaru used a technique comparable to space manipulation, it was useless. Dankon was real space manipulation, allowing him to avoid that fatal blow unscathed. Completing his Bankai training had enhanced his spatial awareness. He would be able to dodge both head-on attacks and sneak attacks the next moment. Jin Ikamaru stabbed, and the god-killing spear impaled Hakuha Uehara's head. As it hit, Jin Ikamaru's eyes widened slightly. Sighing, he said, I was careless. Then, he raised his hands. I give up. Sorry, Captain Aizen, I tried my best. The Uehara Baiyu with a pierced head suddenly appeared behind Ikamaru Jin, retracting a powerful punch. Passed. Jin Ikamaru had almost been hit. The Uehara Baiyu with a pierced head shattered on the ground, revealing a lifelike ice sculpture. Soifang was silent. Kutsuji-kun looked at Uehara Shiraha's Zanpakuto with a strange light. Kuchiki Byakuya muttered, is that an eternal Shirkai Zanpakuto? I've heard of it, but it's still amazing to see. Shiba Ishin gazed at the ice sculpture. Kairaku Shunsui had better eyesight, saying, he even carved a dog head on the ice sculpture's clothes. You're something else, brother Baiyu. The captains fell silent. Ikamaru Jin was strong, definitely captain level. He couldn't beat Uehara Baiyu in his Bankai simply because Uehara Baiyu was too strong. The Soul Society's greatest genius was worthy of the title. The old man, who had been pretending to sleep, paused, rapping his cane. Then, based on Commander Uehara's assessment, I, as captain of the Godai 13, announced the results. I promote Vice Captain Jin Ikamaru of the 5th Division to Captain of the 3rd Division. Hearing the captain's announcement, the captains snapped out of their shock. Congratulations, Jin. I knew you could do it. Aizen gave a false smile, looking radiant. Kamamura Sajin and Kairaku Shunsui both nodded to Ikamaru Jin. The other captains had gloomy faces and remained silent. Ikamaru Jin wasn't annoyed, smiling and thanking Aizen and Uehara Shiraha. Uehara Shiraha laughed and dealt with it. The captains looked at Uehara Shiraha with complicated expressions. He was young, but he held a higher rank than themselves and possessed greater strength. Finished catching up. Can we start now? Impatient, Byakuya Kuchiki appeared in the arena center in a flash. Uehara Shiraha also arrived, first glancing at Byakuya Kuchiki. Byakuya Kuchiki's face was cold, wearing a star-pulling clamp for nobles and a silver-white wind-flowered gauze for dog owners. Uehara Shiraha nodded to Byakuya Kuchiki, indicating that it was time to begin. Scatter, 1,000 cherry blossoms. Without a word, Byakuya Kuchiki released his Zanpakuto. A few cherry blossoms fell. Byakuya Kuchiki's Zanpakuto had become thousands of sharp red blades. Each blade was like a cherry blossom petal, small and sharp. Looking at the deadly petals, Shiroha Uehara smiled. Beautiful Shirkai. Kuchiki-san, the cherry blossoms in your hometown must be blooming. The pink petals covered him. Uehara Shiroha didn't dodge, waving his hand gently. Boom! Uehara dispersed the blades. Kuchiki Byakuya used his most proficient Hado of 4 white thunders. A white lightning bolt shot towards Uehara. Byakuya Kuchiki attacked. Uehara didn't look. Inverted mountain crystal. A triangular blue particle barrier enveloped Uehara's body. The white thunder and blades of Senbon Zakura were blocked. The captains were surprised. They could perform the 73rd binding art without chanting, but they could never block all of Kuchiki Byakuya's attacks as easily as Uehara did. The captains looked at each other. seeing shock and seriousness. Hakuba was comprehensive, his white fighting was strong and his ghost art was to that of a ghost master. Kairaku Shunsui said, Brother Baiyu is an artist, he's interested in painting, music, sculpture and other fields. Uehara Baiyu was even appointed as an honorary consultant by the Female Death God Association. Chapter 55. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Hearing that, the captains were stunned. Could he really be the Soul King's bastard? Back on the fighting platform, Byakuya Kachiki pulled out all the stops, Kido, hand-to-hand combat, swordsmanship. But nothing worked against Hakuha Uehara. Hakuha Uehara goaded him, you gotta use your Bankai if you want to beat me. Normally, Byakuya Kachiki wouldn't even consider it. After all, he had his pride, as a noble and a soul reaper. He couldn't bring himself to use Bankai against Shirkai in a sparring match, but the truth was, without it, he couldn't even touch the guy, let alone win. Scatter, Senbenzakura Kageyoshi. Kuchiki Byakuya pointed his sword downward and let go. Ripples spread across the ground. Senbenzakura vanished into those ripples. A massive surge of spiritual pressure erupted from Kuchiki Byakuya. Then, thousands of giant blades rose up from the ground, aimed right at Uehara Shiraha. The blades lined up neatly on either side of Kuchiki Byakuya, forming an intimidating corridor. Suddenly, they dissolved into countless petals, just like Senbenzakura's initial release, and swarmed toward Uehara Shiraha. Uehara Shiraha blurred into motion, moving so fast he left only afterimages. Running won't help you, Kuchiki Byakuya said, his voice calm. The power of Bankai Senbenzakura is that billions of blades can attack from every direction, covering a huge area. He manipulated the blades with both hands, chasing and intercepting Uehara Shiraha, controlling them with both hands doubled their speed, creating a storm of blades that no one could escape. After dodging a few times, Uehara Shiraha lost interest. He had just wanted to see if he could outrun Senbenzakura's pursuit using only Shuinpa. Turns out, it was a piece of cake. Bankai Senbenzakura in this form might give regular captains trouble, but it was no threat to Uehara Shiraha. Uehara Shiraha was using captain-level Shuinpa to effortlessly evade the overwhelming blades. Kuchiki Byakuya was still too green. Uehara decided to drop the act. He stopped abruptly, and the billions of blades completely engulfed him like a crimson tide of flowers. Have you given up? No way. Kuchiki Byakuya's composed expression crumbled as he stared at Uehara Shiraha, who was shredded to pieces but still perfectly fine. Uehara Shiraha casually admired the deadly flower dance around him and remarked, That's a pretty sight. It's not cherry blossom season yet, but it's nice to see them falling anyway. Kuchiki Byakuya's Bankai was quite beautiful. The other captains were speechless, using spiritual pressure to defend against Bankai. Give us a break. Soul Reapers were inherently weak in vitality and defense. Spiritual pressure could provide a defensive barrier, but it required actively releasing it with full force, which was inefficient and drained energy quickly. Plus, you couldn't just unleash spiritual pressure on demand. It needed to be timed and charged, unless you were a beast like Kenpachi Zaraki, who could rely on his passively emitted spiritual pressure to shrug off attacks. That's why the 11th Division's Kenpachi Zaraki was considered indestructible. His defense and vitality were off the charts. Even he could only withstand vice-captain level attacks at best, not captain level ones. What they were seeing now was unbelievable. Was Hakuha Uehara really that strong? Almost all the captains were shocked. Only Kenpachi Zaraki grinned savagely, baring his long, sharp teeth, his hands shaking slightly as he gripped his sword. This was the fight he wanted. This was the opponent he craved. Flower Mirror, Senbenzakura Kageyoshi. Kuchiki Byakuya regained his composure and activated his Bankai. Under his control, countless pink Senbenzakura blades formed circles of rosy mist, creating a breathtaking display. But the next moment, the mist coalesced into a massive sphere, enveloping Uehara Shiraha completely, leaving no escape. As he attacked, Kuchiki Byakuya warned, this is a super powerful strike made of billions of blades. Its lethality is far beyond that of ordinary Senbenzakura blades. Ice Age. Faced with the incredibly powerful strike, Uehara Shiraha drew his blade and slashed upward. With a simple wave, the white album activated, freezing the Senbenzakura blades mid-strike. even halting the wind pressure created by their movement. To the captain's astonishment, the sharp blades floated silently in the air, their pink light intensifying as they gradually turned into crystal ice. The 1,000 cherry blossoms were now even more beautiful than before. That's one hell of a move. Ikemara Jin shielded his eyes, gazing up at the pink ice blades. He glanced at Uehara Baiyu, who remained calm and relaxed, and sighed. But freezing everything is still a better skill. Glad I bowed out when I did. You did fine, Jin. Uehara is just too strong, Aizen said with his usual warmth. Kenpachi Zaraki scowled and muttered, damn ice. Stops me from cutting loose. Guess I can't hold back anymore, except for a few of the most ancient captains. The others stared up at the giant pink ice in the sky, silently calculating their odds. They shook their heads. Kuchiki Byakuya's Senbonzakura was manageable, but Uehara Shiraha's ability to freeze everything was just too much. They saw shades of the oldest and most powerful fire-type Zanpakuto. The Shirkai was so strong. The strongest ice-type Zanpakuto wasn't just a myth. After all, compared to that, the legendary Hyarinmura seemed overrated. Uehara Shiraha approached Kuchiki Byakuya and said calmly, before me, surging lava stills, and raging seas subside. That's the power of the White Album. It seems my Senbonzakura and your Zanpakuto aren't a good match, Kuchiki Byakuya responded, unleashing his final move, Flower Mirror, Senbonzakura Kagyoshi. He poured all his spiritual pressure into the attack, shattering the frozen Senbonzakura blades, sending them scattering in all directions. The countless pink petals coalesced into energy swords in the style of Senbonzakura. Thousands of pink swords hung suspended in the air, forming a series of rings. Soon, a circular barrier of pink swords appeared between the two fighters. Uehara Shiraha looked around, his expression relaxed. Abandoning defense to go all in on offense, but because it was a sparring match, Kuchiki Byakuya elaborated, since large-scale attacks are ineffective against you, I can only go all out. I'd rather not use this sword formation, but I have no choice. Against the combined offense and defense of billions of cherry blossom blades, enemies would panic and be torn to shreds. That's what Byakuya Kuchiki had always believed, but today, Uehara Shiraha shattered that belief. Desperate, Byakuya Kuchiki had no other choice. The other captains watched the circular sword formation with bated breath, eager to see its power and curious if Uehara Shiraha would be forced to unleash his own Bankai. Uehara Shiraha remained unfazed, with a wave of Kuchiki Byakuya's hand. A single blade from the circular sword formation flew into his grasp. The pink energy blade transformed into an ordinary Senbonzakura. Then, sword in hand, Kuchiki Byakuya flashed forward, slashing at Uehara Shiraha. This time, Uehara Shiraha showed some interest. He raised Sky Break to block the attack. Kuchiki Byakuya stretched out his hand, and another pink sword flew to him, transforming into a standard Senbonzakura. In the circular sword formation, several pink blades took aim at Uehara Shiraha. The two engaged in a furious exchange of blows. Flash step, Kido, swordsmanship, hand-to-hand combat. Kuchiki Byakuya used everything he had. As a noble prodigy as renowned as Shiba Kaien, Kuchiki Byakuya deserved his reputation as a genius captain. His Kido, hand-to-hand skills, flash step, and swordsmanship were all flawless. Among his peers, he was unparalleled, but the other captains noticed something strange. Every time Kuchiki Byakuya displayed a hint of brilliance, Uehara Shiraha effortlessly surpassed him in the same area. Ikemara Jin, fresh from his defeat, watched the two fighters with a smile, his eyes narrowed, his thoughts unreadable. Doesn't it feel like Captain Kuchiki is just a miniature version of Commander Uehara? Shiba Ishin blurted out. Aizen smoothed things over. Well, he is the head of one of the 5 great noble families, so he's exceptional in every way. Nobles, commoners, doesn't matter, all I need to do is kill him, Zaraki Kenpachi said, his voice low, his bloodthirsty gaze fixed on Uehara Shiraha. That's how you fight, enjoying the battle, enjoying the killing. That he looked like a gourmand who had just discovered the most delicious dish imaginable. All he wanted now was a life-or-death battle with Uehara Hakuha. While Kenpachi Zaraki seethed with excitement and the other captains wore confused expressions, 4th Division Captain Unohana Retsu didn't even look up, as if she were counting ants. This kind of battle, this kind of killing, didn't excite her, and Unohana Retsu had been Restraining that excitement, waiting patiently, after Uehara Baiyu repelled him once more, Kuchiki Byakuya stared at the broken weapon in his hand in silence. What's wrong? All over. Uehara Shiraha was a little hyped up. As cool as magic was, there was an undeniable thrill in chopping people with a blade. Kuchiki Byakuya was strong across the board compared to ordinary captains, and his swordsmanship was solid, but against Uehara Shiraha, who possessed advanced captain-level sword skills, it wasn't enough. Kuchiki Byakuya shook his head. The gap is too vast. This wasn't a fight at all. I've been embarrassing myself the whole time. In a real fight, Byakuya Kuchiki would have unleashed his final move, the end-scene White Emperor sword. But this was just a sparring match. He wasn't trying to kill, he was trying to prove himself. Even if he defeated Uehara Hakuha with that move, it wouldn't prove anything. He had used his full Bankai and pulled out all the stops, while the other guy hadn't even broken a sweat, his own Bankai proving useless. Winning would only prove that he was a joke, and deep down, Byakuya Kuchiki knew that even with the White Emperor sword, he might not be able to defeat Uehara Hakuha in his current state. Seeing no more progress possible, he decided to stop. He would train harder, eliminating all doubts and weaknesses. You're already an excellent captain, Uehara Baiyu said generously. After all, he was the second most handsome guy around, and his ability to put on airs was impressive. He remembered when Baymax first appeared, he was acting all high and mighty. Then, Bankai Strawberry humbled him first, then Ikamaru came along and gave him a beatdown while he gave a little heartfelt speech, and almost kicked the bucket. Looks like he was only badass for that first introduction, the rest was all downhill. If you lose, get out of my sight. With a wild, animalistic roar, Kenpachi Zaraki charged forward, yelling, "Come on and kill me, Uehara Baiyu." He swung his sword. Boom! The terrifying slash pulverized the rock martial arts platform, sending debris flying, creating a huge crater. The arena was built from the strongest materials, designed to withstand captain-level attacks, but under Kenpachi Zaraki's blade, it was as fragile as tofu. Kuchiki Byakuya frowned slightly and flashed onto the stage. Looking at the impatient Kenpachi Zaraki, Uehara Baiyu said helplessly, "Are you guys treating me like Lu Bu or something? I'm tired, how about we do this another time?" His main goals were Ikamaru Jin and Kuchiki Byakuya, and he succeeded. Fighting a beast like Zaraki Kenpachi wouldn't be so relaxing. For other people, fighting is just a means, not the end. Like robbers rob to get money, to enjoy life more, but for Zaraki Kenpachi, the robbery is the enjoyment. He gets off on the fighting and the thrill of the kill, not the end result. This guy gets more excited the more he fights, but he doesn't even get much pleasure if he wins. Another time? No way. Kenpachi Zaraki ripped off his eye patch and roared, "I'm fully armed now. Don't even try to freeze me. Fight me." As the eye patch fell away, a golden beam of light shot into the sky. The air around the beam seemed to tear, crackling with electricity. The spirit particles in the atmosphere vibrated violently, distorting space. Wherever the spiritual pressure washed over, countless pieces of gravel floated upward. The boundless, bloodthirsty intent and terrifying spiritual pressure spread outward, causing the barrier around the arena to tremble. The captains watched in stunned silence. No wonder Captain Zaraki defeated the previous Kenpachi without using Bankai. His spiritual pressure is just insane. Shiba Ishin exclaimed. Ikamaru Jin narrowed his eyes. He's a monster, all right. Aizen, looking at the frenzied Kenpachi Zaraki, initially frowned slightly, before quickly adopting an expression of shock. As expected of the captain of the battle squad, much better than me, who is not good at fighting. Such barbarism. Mayuri Kuratsuchi said, looking with distaste at the mask Kenpachi Zaraki had thrown away. He had put so much time and effort into developing that eye patch, which was made exactly to Kenpachi Zaraki's specifications. It continuously absorbed Kenpachi Zaraki's spiritual pressure, reducing his strength. The spiritual pressure of this beast was undeniably impressive, but his invention was perfect, effectively limiting the beast's power, and this beast had no appreciation for such a flawless product. Barbarian. Chapter 56. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The spiritual pressure Kenpachi Zaraki unleashed was so intense, even the reinforced barrier struggled to contain it. Several soldiers from the 1st Squad and Kido Corps near the barrier's edge were the first to be overwhelmed, completely engulfed by his power. In that instant, they felt like they were being pierced by razor-sharp blades, and they saw visions of loved ones who had passed, beckoning to them. Their eyes rolled back, and they collapsed. Okiga Genshiro, who had been talking to Suzuki Chojiro, reacted instantly and rushed to the fallen soldiers. Chojiro Suzuki followed, quickly moving the unconscious Shinigami to safety. "Are they all right?" Okiga Genshiro asked, concerned. Suzuki Chojiro shook his head. "They're just drained. A massive, sudden spiritual pressure drain is exhausting. When Shinigami sense a strong spiritual pressure, their instinct is to fight back with their own. If the disparity in power is too great, the weaker one is left completely depleted, collapsing and losing consciousness. I never imagined he'd become this powerful so quickly," Okiga Genshiro said, watching the arena inside the barrier. "But is this really safe?" "That's Kenpachi Zaraki we're talking about. The guy who practically bleeds immortality." Over the years, Kenpachi Zaraki had slaughtered countless foes, forging a reputation of iron and blood. Compared to other squad captains, this bloodthirsty warrior was far more deadly and terrifying. Chojiro Suzuki calmly replied, "The captain commander wouldn't have agreed to this match if this kid didn't have something special up his sleeve." For him, having witnessed mountains of corpses and oceans of blood, this murderous aura was just another day in the office. The original Godei 13, filled with ruthless individuals, made a far stronger impression than this. Meanwhile, back in the Suriidei at 933, all the Shinigami, including officers and vice-captains, paled and looked in the direction of the horrifying spiritual pressure. Seeing the golden pillar of energy rising in the distance, they were buzzing with disbelief. "Is that a spirit energy beam? That's insane. What the hell is going on? I heard it's a captain's evaluation." "So, all the captains are just monsters then?" "The captain just dropped the restraints and unleashed everything." On a rooftop with golden tiles, Madarame was momentarily stunned, then focused his senses. After a moment, he sighed, "So, it's the guy who beat me before. If it was him, he'd make the captain fight all out. This is gonna be awesome." Iasegawa Yumachika, standing next to him, cupped his ears and also tried to sense the situation in the training grounds. "It's hard to tell with the barrier, but it seems like a beautiful battle between powerhouses. I can practically feel the passion." He didn't completely agree with the 11th Division's obsession with fighting, but he could still appreciate the unique charisma of Madarame Ikaku and Captain Zaraki. It was like an awakening. "Well, Kenny's definitely having a blast." At that moment, Kusajishi Yachiru appeared on the roof in a flash, then scowled and said angrily, "Hope he kicks that jerk Shiroha's butt. He always steals my snacks and picks on me." If she wasn't too weak to beat Uehara Bayu, she would have thrown him out of the Female Shinigami Association a long time ago. Abarai Renji, watching from below, stared towards the training grounds, his face full of longing. He was chasing power, and Captain Zaraki Kenpachi was the embodiment of power. Meanwhile, in the 10th Division barracks, the 3rd Seat Hitsugaya Toshiro held higher Inmaru and kept practicing Bankai. He needed to train harder. Facing Kenpachi Zaraki's overwhelming spiritual pressure, Uehara Shiraha sighed. "This is why I said I was tired." Feeling the intense fighting spirit radiating from Kenpachi Zaraki, he couldn't help but get serious. Fighting a battle maniac like Kenpachi Zaraki was a quick way to get your blood pumping. Even Uehara Shiraha, who preferred a quiet life, was finding the fight exciting. Watching the two fighters, the captains were on edge. Several ordinary captains were close to panicking. They were both only in Shirkai, and it was unbelievable that they could exert so much pressure. Case closed. These two were monsters. Even Unohana Retsu, who was always composed and graceful, was finally showing a hint of emotion. Soifang remained fairly calm. She had previously thought that even if Ikamara Jin and Kuchiki Byakuya couldn't defeat Uehara Shiraha, Captain Zaraki definitely could. After all, this was the famous Kenpachi of Soul Society, known as the strongest fighter and practically immortal. But now Soifang figured that if she could force out Uehara Shiraha's Bankai, he had already won. Defeating him outright was too difficult. "Come on, take this hit." You earned it. Kenpachi Zaraki roared excitedly, tearing off his clothes, his eyes burning with bloodlust. Uehara Baiyu sighed. You still remember that? Fine, I won't hold back. He slashed without hesitation. It looked like an ordinary strike, but it was incredibly lethal. Captain-level swordsmanship wasn't simple, and that was because Uehara Baiyu wasn't using Breath of the Sun, or 7 flashes. Otherwise, no one could survive, not even a 1,000-year-old captain. That all you got? Doesn't even tickle. Kenpachi Zaraki's eyes turned icy. You better get serious. If you bore me like the last few times, I'll kill you. That he hadn't felt this kind of rush in a long time. If this fight was a letdown, he would definitely lose it. The problem is you, not me. Uehara Shiraha said, somewhat exasperated. Like Ichigo Buddha, Zaraki Kenpachi was a mood-based warrior. The stronger the pressure, the stronger he became. The weaker the opponent, the weaker he was. Kurosaki Ichigo's strength depended on his emotions, and he almost never used his full power against his enemy. Except for his mother's killer, Yawatch, Ichigo Kurosaki never had any intention to kill. It was similar to the high school student Jotaro Kujo who was afraid that the school is not violent enough. Of course, Tsukishima's Minotaur who dances wildly on the edge of death is an exception, not to mention Kurosaki Ichigo. Even Konoha's Prince Naruto would have to, probably still choose to forgive him. As for Zaraki Kenpachi, it was very simple, that is, to ensure that the strength is similar to that of the enemy and enjoy the battle process. In addition, like Ichigo Buddha, Zaraki Kenpachi started out at his peak. He even had the upper hand in his battle with Unohana Retsu 1,000 years ago, but because he was afraid of killing Unohana Retsu and couldn't find a true opponent, he sealed most of his power. When fighting a strong opponent, he would gradually release his power. Once the battle was over, he would reseal his power. Uehara Hakuha had always wondered where he had learned that sealing technique. It was so useful. Just now, even an ordinary captain would have been down after Uehara Hakuha's strike, but Kenpachi Zaraki was fine. He was obviously cheating. Probably because he was afraid of freezing to death, Kenpachi Zaraki immediately removed a portion of his seal. Although Kenpachi Zaraki wasn't at his full power initial release state, he was pretty much at full throttle. It was definitely high-level captain level. Looks like it was time to show his real skills. At that moment, Kenpachi Zaraki finally realized, what? I got too pumped up and used too much power. To really enjoy the kill, you gotta control yourself. Don't want this to end too fast, but if it's you, I guess it's okay. Unohana Retsu's eyes glimmered as she watched Kenpachi Zaraki's power surge. Her dormant heart was beginning to stir. You forced my hand. Don't blame me for what happens next. Uehara Baiyu felt this was a golden opportunity, so he decided to show some manly romance and pull out a mecha. Raising Dankong, he pointed the blade at Kenpachi Zaraki. Bankai, Frostmourne, that the captains gasped. Several exclaimed in unison, could it be? Finally. I've been waiting for this guy's Bankai for so long. How intriguing. Let's see what you've been hiding. Soifong clenched her fists and whispered, I'll see for myself just how wide the gap between us really is. Terrible, so terrible, Ikamara Jin drawled, his tone as unpleasant as ever. Even Yamamoto Genryusai Shigekuni and Unohana Retsu turned their attention to Uehara Hakuha's Zanpakuto. First, a white pillar of spiritual pressure erupted, then, an incredibly heavy, terrifying, and chilling aura of ice condensed on Uehara Hakuha and the blade. A complex, exquisite, heavy, and epic suit of armor materialized. The weapon in Uehara Baiyu's hand transformed into a gorgeous greatsword, radiating evil and power. Finally, an armored warrior clad in moon-white heavy armor stood before them. Uehara Baiyu wore a moon-white four-pointed crown, and a pristine white cloak billowed behind him. His entire body was encased in impenetrable heavy armor, with strong, polished shoulder plates. In his hand, he wielded a blue and white double-edged sword. Blue runes and white frost swirled across the blade. If any World of Warcraft enthusiasts were here, they would shout, holy crap, Frostmourne. Lich King. Uehara Baiyu's look was inspired by the Lich King Arthas. The perfect level of control allowed him to condense the moisture in the air into detailed armor. Even the notorious Filial Sun sword was a perfect replica. The filial sun sword is a special weapon designed to slay kings. It's a natural counter for those who claim to be superior, like that pirate king, Yawach, who likes to think of everyone as his son. After completing his Bankai, Uehara Hakuha casually swung Frostmourne. Instantly, his majestic spiritual pressure shook the heavens and the earth, and the invisible power of ice froze everything. The barrier around them began to shrink and tremble, as if about to collapse. The captains, who had been shocked by Zaraki Kenpachi's spiritual pressure, were now overwhelmed by a sense of annihilation, as if all life was about to be extinguished. Uehara Hakuha's spiritual pressure was far greater than Zaraki Kenpachi's, and far greater than they had anticipated. The ordinary captains who had barely been able to stand before were now on the verge of collapse. In addition, everyone was gripped by a sudden, bone-chilling cold, freezing souls. This Ryatsu, this Bankai. Looking at Uehara Shiraha's flamboyant, gorgeous, and menacing Bankai, Kairaku Shunsui sighed. No wonder Brother Baiyu doesn't use his Bankai lightly. I get it now. He thought he was the only one hiding a powerful and terrifying Bankai. He had to admit that Brother Baiyu's Bankai was as powerful as his. Kairaku Shunsui felt the sympathy between the two old silver coins once again. Shiba Ishin remarked, Uehara's Bankai seems a bit different from ours. The other captains nodded in agreement. Regardless of their strength, most of their Bankai were somewhat subtle. Uehara Baiyu's Bankai was bold, flashy, impactful, and powerful. It was very rare. At that moment, Soifang felt her body stiffen and heard Kamamura Sajin's exclamation. Captain Soifang, you. What's wrong? Soifang looked to Kamamura's left and saw that the helmet across from her was white, covered in frost. She quickly wiped her face, and her fingers were frozen. The captains were shocked to discover a layer of frost on their clothes and bodies. Retreat outside the barrier. Yamamoto Genryusai Shigekuni shouted, flashing away. Kairaku Shunsui warned, it's coming. Move. Everyone looked up and saw a wave of freezing cold air rushing toward them. Not wanting to be frozen alive, the captains quickly retreated outside the barrier. They stared at Uehara Baiyu's ornate longsword in shock. This asterisk was Frostmourne. Terrifying. Here it comes again. This time the spiritual pressure is even more terrifying. Is it Saraki again? No, that's not right. This is. Outside the barrier, Okiga Genshiro grumbled. Suzuki Chojiro sensed something and quickly retreated. What's wrong? Okiga Genshiro asked, confused. Suzuki Chojiro urged, get them out of here. It's dangerous. He quickly moved the fallen Shinigami further away. He thought this distance would be safe enough, even if Kenpachi Zaraki released more spiritual pressure, but he never expected something even more ruthless to occur. He was fine, but the fallen Shinigami wouldn't stand a chance. Is that the boy's Bankai? Okiga Genshiro asked. Suzuki Chojiro nodded grimly. They hurriedly moved the fallen Shinigami even further away. Behind them, the captains also moved back to the side of the barrier. Chapter 57. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At that moment, the temperature in the entire Soul Society plummeted. Every Shinigami felt a chilling, oppressive, and terrifying spiritual pressure. Unlike Zaraki Kenpachi's, which felt strong but distant due to barriers, this felt like being plunged into a frozen wasteland. Their limbs went numb, and they trembled uncontrollably. An unprecedented fear gripped them, like a physical blow. Several members of the 11th Division, closest to the training grounds, were practically paralyzed, unable to even muster their own spiritual pressure. The Imperial Army Shinigami, Ayase Nanao, Hinamori Momo, Rukia, and Matsumoto Ranjaku, recognized the signature spiritual pressure and gasped, it's the Captain Commander. Mr. Uehara. Baiyu. They realized that Baiyu Uehara was actually the one fighting Kenpachi Zaraki. Instantly, confidence surged through them. There's no way the captain can lose. He wouldn't be doing this if he wasn't sure he could win. Outside the barrier, the captain stared in disbelief. Since Uehara Baiyu had unleashed his Bankai, an endless wave of icy air had spread outward, frost formed in the air, and a blanket of white ice began to creep across the ground. The entire training ground was now a winter wonderland. Shattered stone pillars and debris were encased in thick, icy armor. A biting wind and swirling frost transformed the area into an early, harsh winter. It had been a sunny day just moments before. Even through the barrier, the captains could see their own breath fogging in the air. Without the barrier, this would be a disaster. Shiba Ishin said grimly, the Bankai was like a force of nature, far too dangerous. Kairaku Shunsui glanced at the old man, who was resting with his eyes closed. I wonder if Uehara Bayou will turn into a monster like the old man in the mountain someday. Dong Xianyao focused his spiritual sense on the battle, thinking, Kenpachi Zaraki truly is a monster. Those who prioritize fighting above the rules of the Soul Society will inevitably cause problems. My sense of justice can't allow such a threat to exist. And this Uehara Shiraha. He had a feeling that Uehara Bayou might become an obstacle to their plans. Back in the arena, Kenpachi Zaraki stood in the heart of the cold, clutching his sword. He held the jagged Zanpakuto horizontally, angled in front of him. His right hand remained still, yet the blade trembled slightly from the sheer pressure of Uehara Bayou's spiritual force. Kenpachi Zaraki grinned. It's been a while since I've enjoyed having my blade sharpened by an opponent's spiritual pressure alone. I missed this. He raised his Zanpakuto, pointing the broken blade at Uehara Bayou, and began to gather his strength. Aren't you cold? A muffled voice asked from beneath the helmet. Hakuba Uehara. He'd obviously activated his stand, so why was this guy unaffected? Kenpachi Zaraki scoffed, I've been frozen by you plenty of times. My body's used to it. He'd challenged Hakuba Uehara countless times before, but he never had any fun, barely even got to draw his sword. It was frustrating. This time, Kenpachi Zaraki was ready to unleash everything he had. While Kenpachi Zaraki charged up, Hakuba Uehara wasn't idle. He intensified his own spiritual pressure. The watching captains were even more astonished. Even now, they could still increase their spiritual force. Did these two have no limits? Kenpachi Zaraki was completely focused. He'd never unleashed his power so recklessly. Usually, he carefully restrained himself, afraid of killing his opponent too quickly and ruining the fun, but this time, he had a feeling, unless he used everything he had, he couldn't even threaten Uehara Hakuba. If he couldn't hurt the enemy, it wasn't a fight, and it was pointless. In an instant, Kenpachi Zaraki built up his power and unleashed a devastating strike towards Uehara Hakuba. It was the most powerful strike he had unleashed since he came to Soul Society. Words couldn't describe the sheer force behind it. The strike locked onto Uehara Hakuba's body and will, even seeming to freeze time and space around him. There was no dodging or blocking this attack. That was the terrifying nature of a master swordsman. One strike to kill. No matter how strong you are, it was a demonstration of overwhelming power. One strike breaks all. Ichigo showcased the potential of overwhelming strength to achieve miracles, and Kenpachi Zaraki's strike was a miracle capable of cutting through anything. Uehara Bayou, holding Frostmourne, countered with a slash of his own. Without a word or glance, their blades collided. The white and gold spiritual pressure surrounding their weapons clashed. The force of the impact erupted, engulfing the two fighters in an energy shield. Then, the shield shattered, and countless shockwaves exploded. Outwards, the high arena was ripped to shreds. Each shockwave carved a massive gully, big enough for several people to walk side by side. Bottomless pits appeared, causing the arena to crumble. Only the spot where the two stood remained intact. The barrier surrounding the training grounds began to shake and warp, and cracks appeared. Kuratsuchi Mayuri had designed the barrier to withstand an ordinary captain's full-strength attack, but he hadn't anticipated two monsters fighting. Under the force of two strikes that threatened to destroy the world, the seemingly indestructible barrier was about to give way. Oh crap! Kairaku Shunsui reacted and rushed forward to reinforce it with his own spiritual pressure. Dunohana Retsu followed close behind, with the two Millennium captains lending their strength. The barrier finally stabilized. Impossible, my designs defeated by brute force. Kuratsuchi Mayuri muttered in despair. The other captains were left speechless. The duel was truly awe-inspiring. When the dust settled, the destroyed arena and the two motionless figures were finally visible. The captains were eager to know who had won. Uehara Shiraha and Zaraki Kenpachi stood on opposing peaks, having passed each other in the clash. Several huge, crisscrossing gullies marked the landscape. Each gully was the result of a collision between their blades. Frost rapidly formed in the gullies, freezing them solid. The entire arena, even its terrain, had been ruined by the clash of blades and the freezing air. Amazing combat sense. Uehara Baiyu looked down at the white marks on his icy armor. I was aiming to take your head off in one shot, but you dodged the vital points and even managed to slash me. That he knew that this guy's vitality was cockroach-like, becoming stronger with each defeat. To prevent him from pulling out some new form, Uehara Baiyu had unleashed the full power of his stand. At the moment of impact, the Zanpakuto in Kenpachi Zaraki's hand turned brittle, as if it had been struck by Daisho's cold breath. The rest was simple. Uehara Baiyu shattered the weapon and aimed for the aorta. Unexpectedly, Kenpachi Zaraki had twisted his body at the last second to avoid the fatal blow, and struck him with the broken sword. Uehara Shiraha admired the resilience of Kenpachi Zaraki. Although Kenpachi Zaraki could be reckless, he was not stupid. Kenpachi Zaraki possessed incredible combat intuition and was a true beast. Tozen Kaname in the distance was staring intently at Kenpachi Zaraki. Tozen Kaname's Bankai was broken by Kenpachi Zaraki with his intuition and touch during the travel disaster arc. Kenpachi could quickly dodge when the blade was about to strike, and even grab the enemy's wrist to counterattack. His reaction ability, combat intuition, and combat awareness were all exceptional. Kenpachi Zaraki stared at his broken sword and the icy wound on his chest, roaring, "Is that it? No way. This is just the beginning. Move, damn it." But his consciousness was fading. With his last breath, Kenpachi Zaraki choked out, next time, I'll definitely." Frost engulfed him, freezing the words in his throat. "I know what you wanted to say, but I don't really want to hear it." Uehara Baiyu shrugged and deactivated the power of White Album. He could admit that Zaraki's ability to grow stronger through battle was terrifying, but it was useless if he killed him with one strike. Ultimately, strength was everything. As Uehara Baiyu released his stand, the icy landscape returned to normal. His helmet vanished, revealing a confident face. He had defeated 3 opponents without even breaking a sweat. Outside the barrier, the captain stared at the frozen Kenpachi Zaraki. Speechless with shock, they couldn't believe what they just witnessed. That beast, the 11th Kenpachi, the man known as the strongest, had been defeated. And he'd been defeated so decisively, with no hope of victory. Soifang's face was a mask of shock as she muttered, "So that's the difference between us." Byakuya Kachiki clenched his fists. He was a clown all along. What was a battle to the death for him was barely a warm-up for Uehara Shiraha. Kamamura Sajin and Shiba Ishin were stunned. Ikamaru Jin also lost his trademark smile, his expression serious, with a hint of relief. Mayuri Kuratsuchi's golden eyes gleamed with an odd light as he stared at Uehara Shiraha. Captain General Yamamoto's expression remained unchanged. When Zaraki Kenpachi fell, Unohana Retsu started to rush to his aid, but she stopped immediately. Uehara Shiraha had frozen all of Zaraki Kenpachi's wounds, keeping him safe for the time being. The method looked scary, but it was more effective than any regular first aid. This man was truly special. Tozen Kaname clenched his fists, the veins throbbing in his forehead, his heart filled with unease. "I didn't realize this monster possessed such destructive power. Kenpachi Zaraki is a threat to justice." But even such a powerful monster was defeated by Uehara Shiraha in one move. This strength, Uehara Shiraha, are you a dark cloud or a gust of wind that tears apart the dark clouds? That his good friend Atsumiyu had become a Shinigami with the dream of being a gust of wind to blow away the darkness and brighten the stars. However, Atsumiyu, who had such a dream, died at the hands of her husband Tsuneyashiro Tokunada. Tozen Kaname would never forgive the Shinigami and would not give up his friend's dream. On the surface, the 2 old foxes, Kairaku Shunsui and Aizen, were calm. But one was ecstatic and the other's mind was racing, calculating the best countermeasures. High above, in the Soul King Palace, Hayashibu Ichibai was using his secret technique to observe the ruined training ground. He had noticed the situation the moment Uehara Shiraha activated his Bankai, as the one who controlled the names of all things. Hayashibu Ichibai knew that Uehara Shiraha had given a false name for his Bankai. At first, he wasn't concerned. Without the true name, the Zanpakuto's Bankai couldn't function properly, but Uehara Shiraha's devastating freezing ability had surprised Hayashibu Ichibai. He replayed the scene and continued to observe Uehara Shiraha leaving the training grounds. After a moment, Hayashibu Ichibai shook his head and murmured, "I still can't figure out how he did it." furthermore, I couldn't see into this Shinigami's inner world, as if blocked by some strange power. What a peculiar boy. In the arena, Uehara Shiraha looked thoughtfully at the mind stone in the Kamui space, which had suddenly emitted a faint light. Was his true name Monk? Knowing that the mind stone could resist the power of this big black monk, Uehara Shiraha relaxed slightly. He knew about the so-called Three Realms adjuster of the Zero Squad. While this sly monk called himself the leader of the Shinigami, he didn't take the Shinigami seriously. The Soul Society had faced several deadly crises, but the Zero Squad had remained silent. They possessed superior technology, but they kept it hidden. Then, by drawing out all the technical talents with innovative power, the Godai 13 was limited. Hayashibu Ichibai had only one goal: I don't care who the Soul King is, the wedge of the three realms must exist. That was why he had sided with the five noble families to check and balance the Godai 13, and used the Shinigami to contain the Quincy and Hueco Mundo. In short, the balance of the three realms was all that mattered to the monk. Therefore, Uehara Shiraha knew that his current actions weren't enough to alarm the Zero Squad, but the future was uncertain. In the shadows of the Soul Society, a technician from the Invisible Empire rushed from the Sun Gate to the palace. The Quincy's in the shadows had inexplicably felt a chill. Under the order of the Emperor's assistant, Ugran Hashwald, the leader of the Stern Cross Knights, the technicians immediately began investigating the matter. Now, the technicians had results. They knelt and reported in a panicked voice, Lord Hashwald, according to our investigation, the Soul Society Shinigami activated his Bankai, causing this phenomenon. Chapter 58. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Hashwald's face tightened. Who is it? Why hadn't they detected someone this strong before? Could it be the kid with the most powerful ice-type Zanpakuto? Uehara Shiraha. The technician answered, respectful. Who? Hashwald racked his brain. The name was completely unfamiliar, not just among the Godai 13 captains, but even among the lieutenants. The technician replied, Uehara Shiraha is the Shinigami who's been causing a stir in Hueco Mundo lately. He's proving difficult to track down. That guy? Hashwald recalled a Shinigami who seemed to avoid the shadows at all costs. He's barely a century old, not even a lieutenant. How could someone like that wield a Bankai of that caliber? That he seemed like a playboy, more or less useless. All Uehara Shiraha did was flaunt himself. How could he suddenly become this powerful? The technician presented Hashwald with a document, using both hands. The spiritual pressure fluctuations were so extreme. This is the clearest image we got. Hashwald took the document. It showed Uehara Shiraha, face calm, ice armor partially removed, and Zaraki Kenpachi, encased in ice from head to toe. After a moment's hesitation, Hashwald had to accept the reality. He felt a knot of unease tighten in his stomach. Could it be? Was Soul Society about to produce another Yamamoto Genryusai Shigekuni? Thinking this, Hashwald immediately barked an order to the technicians. From today on, monitor Uehara Shiraha's movements closely. Gather every scrap of information you can find about him. He dutifully informed the Sternritter of what they knew about Uehara Shiraha. However, several of the Schutzstaffel remained unconvinced. They'd lived their lives riding high, never facing a truly dangerous foe. Besides, how strong could some third seat, obsessed with pleasure, really be? Gerard Valkyrie, a mountain of a man with the Spirit King's heart, boomed, I hope this will be an interesting enemy. His script, M, stood for miracle, giving him near immortality. Fearless, he always charged headfirst into battle. With his left eye shut tight under a black crosshair, Leobaro, captain of the Zeroth division, cracked open his right eye and drawled, have we met any interesting opponents yet? How sharp could a sword be? His script was X, the X-axis, which allowed him to penetrate anything. How could a mirror harm the body of a god? The attitudes of those two pretty much mirrored the thoughts of the other guards. Hashwald saw it, but didn't know how to change their minds. After all, the Sternritter, empowered by the Holy Word, had spent 1,000 years stockpiling power, and they were right to be confident. Meanwhile, back in Soul Society, the news of Uehara Shiraha's victory over Zaraki Kenpachi had spread like wildfire. Ikaku Madarame of the 11th Division locked himself in his room and roared, impossible. Captain Zaraki never loses. Yumachika Ayasegawa and Renji Aburai exchanged stunned looks. Captain Zaraki actually lost to that seemingly unreliable Uehara Shiraha. A guy who was always chasing women and partying somehow possessed that kind of power. What was the point of all their hard training? Yachiru Kusajishi's take was a little different from Ikiku's. I hope little Yu gives Kenny a good fight. That'll make Kenny happy. That she knew that for Kenpachi Zaraki, winning or losing wasn't the point. What mattered was the thrill of the fight. The members of the 11th Division, previously so confident in Kenpachi Zaraki, felt as if their dreams had been shattered, and many cried. Their captain was their living, breathing legend, but now the legend was dead. Uehara Shiraha's sudden surge in strength dealt a heavy blow to the 11th Division, but for others, it was good news. The members of the Kido Corps got an immediate morale boost and renewed loyalty, and they were more eager than ever to take down hollows. A strong leader was the best tonic for soldiers. Other Shinigami in Soul Society also saw Uehara Shiraha as one of their own. He held the rank of third seat in the 1st Division, enjoyed a close relationship with Shunsui Kairaku, and was highly valued by Captain Commander Yamamoto. Within their ranks, this was considered the normal system with a respectable pedigree. On top of that, Uehara Shiraha had been guarding Hueco Mundo, improving the survival rate of his fellow Shinigami. As a result, Uehara Shiraha's reputation in the Godiai 13 rivaled that of the beloved Sosuke Aizen. As for those fans who idolized Uehara Shiraha, they were ecstatic when they heard the news. Even the nobles saw it as a positive development. Over the years, the Godiai 13 had steadily grown in influence, absorbing the Kido Corps and the Onmitsukido. Having a force capable of keeping the Godiai 13 in check was in their interest, as Kenpachi Zaraki was wheeled into the 4th Division's Intensive Care Unit, Chair. And all, Uehara Shiraha attended the post-battle captain promotion ceremony. After the ceremony, he made a few social calls. Uehara Shiraha was now a power player in Soul Society, and a genuinely powerful one at that. In his position, he now understood that the world wasn't just about fighting. It was also about relationships. Kenpachi Zaraki was too impulsive, and Uehara Shiraha wouldn't have had to reveal so much of his strength if it weren't for him, but the upside was that his actions would be more convenient and his voice would carry more weight. With people under his command and a reputation for power, anyone who picked a fight with him was asking for trouble. Of course, the Tsuneyashiro family was an exception. They'd been doing well lately, and their egos had ballooned, and they weren't the sharpest tools in the shed. No one knew what they might do. After all, the Tsuneyashiro family's ancestors had dared to stab the Soul King in the back. Tokunada Tsuneyashiro had slaughtered his entire family just to seize power. Compared to that kind of madness, the neighboring Shiba family would seem tame, but it didn't matter. Uehara Shiraha was ready to strike first. Lost in thought, Yukitake Jushiro's lieutenant, Kaien Shiba, approached Uehara Shiraha, thought for a moment, and said, "Commander Uehara, Captain Yukitake said that he's very grateful for your training of Rukia. He said you're welcome to drop by for tea anytime." Yukitake Jushiro had high hopes for the young Shiba family member. He'd even set aside his captain's Haori for him, waiting for the day he could retire. Therefore, Yukitake Jushiro sent Kaien Shiba to get to know his colleagues in advance. "I'll take him up on that. But Lieutenant Shiba, you're truly promising." Uehara Shiraha was at a loss for words. He was sure that Kaien Shiba was trying to remember his name. It seemed that everyone in the Shiba family suffered from face blindness. Ichigo Kurosaki couldn't even recognize his classmate, Yuryu Ishida. When confronted with someone as well known as himself, he had to stop and think of a name. "Kaien, you should be more careful. Compared to Commander Uehara, my achievements are nothing." Kaien Shiba was very humble, devoid of the arrogance one might expect from a genius and noble. After a short conversation, Kaien Shiba left, satisfied. As a pure Shinigami, he was happy to see a powerhouse like Uehara Shiraha in the Godiai 13. In addition, the 13th Division's lieutenant, Rukia Kachiki, admitted that Uehara Shiraha had helped her a lot. To read exciting novels, go to Falun Novel Network. As soon as Kaien Shiba left, Isshin Shiba approached, leading a little boy with silver hair. "Commander Uehara, this is the 10th Division's prodigy, Toshiro Hitsugaya. His Zanpakuto is also ice-type. If you have time, could you offer Toshiro some guidance?" Toshiro Hitsugaya, dressed in black Shinigami robes, saluted Uehara Shiraha obediently. "Hello, Commander Uehara. I hope you'll guide me." He held Uehara Shiraha in high esteem. As a fellow Ice-type Zanpakuto user, Toshiro Hitsugaya could better appreciate Uehara Shiraha's power and skill. Uehara Shiraha gazed at the pint-sized genius before him and said kindly, "I can't promise any guidance, but I do have some advice. If you can take action, don't talk. And definitely don't argue, or you might lose both the fight and the battle." Seeing this short prodigy, Uehara Shiraha recalled one of his famous lines, "10 weaklings can destroy Soul Society." And every time he fought Aizen, this kid would say a few simple things, hoping to outwit Aizen with words. The result was, of course, that he was neither good at literature nor martial arts, and his defenses were broken by just a few words. No wonder Aizen would always kill a Haku to cheer him up before a fight. All I can say is, if you can't speak, just say less. Though he didn't quite understand, Toshiro bowed politely. "Thank you for your advice. I'll keep it in mind." "You'd better." Uehara Shiraha chuckled inwardly. He knew that this kid would still get carried away when he faced Aizen. After some more greetings, the ceremony concluded. After 50 years of recovery, the Godei 13 had finally healed from the damage of the hollowification incident, and after this battle, no one dared to question Uehara Shiraha's autonomy. Then, amid the envious gazes of all the captains, Shunsui Kairaku and Uehara Shiraha went to the red light district, arms around each other, for a drink. Seeing this scene, Captain Commander Yamamoto tightened his grip on his cane. In the red light district, after a night of fun, Uehara Shiraha left, looking refreshed. As for Shunsui Kairaku, he'd slipped away at midnight. He was just a tool to pay the bill. He just looked cool. In sharp contrast to Uehara Shiraha, Shunsui Kairaku couldn't help but feel bitter. His niece had run off, and he had to handle some sensitive tasks himself, ones he couldn't entrust to others. In addition, the Tsunoyashiro family had become increasingly arrogant. He felt the pressure mounting. Shunsui Kairaku had no choice but to cut down on his leisure time. At this moment, Uehara Shiraha, feeling revitalized, glanced at his daily tasks. Leisure party, daily task. Time to take a break again. Let's get together with friends. Reward, random attribute *2. Uehara Shiraha remembered that today was his monthly break. Although his current strength was impressive, the attribute points provided by the daily task seemed trivial. However, every little bit helps. There were gaps even between captains. There was also a gap between the strongest 1,000-year-old captain and a regular 1,000-year-old captain. Therefore, there was no such thing as too many attribute points. What's more, attribute points could help him overcome the limits of his innate talents. In other words, even if a few hundred years passed, Uehara Shiraha could transcend the limits of his race. That was the power of the task system. Even though his strength was on par with that of a 1,000-year-old captain, he wouldn't give up his daily tasks. The battle between gods would begin in just over 30 years, and it was always a good idea to improve his strength. Besides, daily tasks were easy to complete, and Uehara Shiraha saw them as a way to spice up his life. Why not get stronger and unwind at the same time? Thinking it over, Uehara Shiraha arrived at the private luxury mansion on Noble Street. Uehara Shiraha's current status was unique. He was both the commander of the Kido Corps and the direct disciple of Yamamoto Shigekuni. The Tsunoyashiro family had been trying to win him over for years, and the Kuchiki family also respected him. As a result, Uehara Shiraha had completed the transition to nobility and become a member of that class. As soon as Uehara Shiraha arrived at the mansion, several young maids rushed over to serve him an elaborate breakfast that had been prepared in advance. Enjoying the meal, Uehara Shiraha sighed, what a corrupt aristocratic life. He criticized the extravagance from a moral standpoint, but in reality, Uehara Shiraha embraced it. Then, under the admiring eyes of several maids, yes, good, Uehara Shiraha instantly arrived at the Kuchiki family mansion. It was even bigger than he remembered. An ordinary person entering for the first time would be overwhelmed by the sheer scale of it, and they would easily get lost. Uehara Shiraha knew the Kuchiki family's mansion better than his own home, even better than Byakuya Kuchiki. He casually walked to the second corridor of the outer courtyard, pushed open the secret door on the far left, and was greeted by bright light. He found himself in a spacious and well-lit conference hall, but the decor was feminine. This was after all, the secret headquarters of the Women's Soul Reaper Association. Rukia and Momo Hinamori were arranging platters of fruit, desserts, and other snacks. Teacher Uehara. When they saw Uehara Shiraha, the two girls greeted him happily. Thinking of Uehara Shiraha's performance the previous day, they were visibly excited. Hinamori Momo was the lieutenant of the 5th Division, and Kuchiki Rukia was the lieutenant of the 13th Division. If it weren't for Uehara Shiraha, they would have admired and had faith in their captains, but because Uehara Shiraha's light was so dazzling, the captains' weight in their hearts had been significantly reduced. Uehara Shiraha nodded and glanced at the snacks. Is that all? I'm sorry, teacher. Rukia Kuchiki said guiltily, I've already spent all my salary this month. Knowing that her older brother Byakuya Kuchiki disapproved of her, Rukia Kuchiki had always been independent and refused to accept help from her family. My salary is too low, too. Hinamori Momo stared with innocent eyes. She had just been promoted to lieutenant of the 5th Division and couldn't afford the high-end food on Noble Street. Looking at the two girls, Uehara Shiraha shook his head. You're still too naive. Chapter 59. You are listening at novelfull.audio. It's like you've only picked up my tricks, not the way I connect with people. Remember where these hideouts came from. True powerhouses don't show up here without paying their dues. The two young ones just grinned, not wanting to push it. After they became Uehara students, both Captain Unohana and Captain Kairaku kept telling them to focus on his skills and ignore his quirks. He didn't seem like a bad guy, but they were hesitant to copy some of his moves, like teaming up with Kusaka Yachiru to practically gut the Kuchiki estate, building secret passages and rooms all over the place. Byakuya Kuchiki, Rukia's older brother, tried to stop them more than once, but it never worked. It was basically highway robbery. You guys are still green. You know the saying, it takes a thief to catch a thief. With that, Uehara Bayu opened another hidden door in the wall and disappeared into the secret room behind it. A minute later, he was back with a load of snacks. Whoa, the newest Compito. That stuff's expensive. Rukia Kuchiki's eyes lit up. Momo Hinamori nodded eagerly, clearly wanting some. Uehara Shiraha grinned. Tastes even better when it's free. Later, when Ise Nanao finally finished her work with the Imperial Army and came to the meeting room, she found Uehara Shiraha, Rukia, and Momo Hinamori sneakily chowing down. Seeing the table covered in Compito, Ise Nanao frowned. Wasn't that President's favorite candy? Spotting her expression, Rukia grabbed a Chappie brand Compito and pushed it toward Ise Nanao with a forced smile, offering to share their loot, but then she hesitated, pulled it back, and swapped it for a piece of little white rabbit candy instead. Nanao, you're here. Thanks for all your hard work. Uehara Shiraha said, munching on snacks as he greeted the woman who'd been carrying the team. The Imperial Army's rapid growth wouldn't have been possible without Ise Nanao's dedication. Uehara Shiraha just brainstormed and oversaw everything, while she handled the nitty-gritty details. Commander, picking a fight with Captain Zaraki? That was too risky. Ise Nanao wanted to scold him, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. Instead, she snatched up the Chappie snacks Rukia had tried to hide and ripped open the packaging. Rukia's face fell as her treasured snacks were taken away. She reached out, then let her hand drop. Hinamori Momo just ignored everything and happily ate candy. Turns out, no girl can say no to sweets, and no girl can say no to Uehara Shiraha. With a few smooth words, Uehara Shiraha had Ise Nanao eating out of his hand. Soon, the four of them were eating, laughing, and having a blast. This kind of chill, warm life wasn't as wild as the nightlife down on the Flower District, but it soothed the soul. Uehara Shiraha wasn't complaining. He actually liked it. Just then, a high-pitched voice, full of tears and rage, echoed from the wall. My candy's gone. Thief! With a shriek, the pink-haired lowly, Kusaka Yachiru, burst into the room. Without hesitating, she aimed a kick right at Uehara Bayu. I knew it was you, Zayayuyu. The pink-haired terror was surprisingly fast, but Uehara Bayu simply waved a hand and froze her in mid-air. Seeing this, the three girls sighed. Here we go again. Commander, why'd you freeze President again? Ise Nanao asked, resigned. Hinamori Momo rested her chin on her hands, looking innocent. Isn't President always cold? Rukia chimed in, I bet even if President gets frozen 10,000 times, she'll still charge at Uehara-sensei, and then Uehara-sensei won't think twice about freezing her for the 10,001st time. Nice summary. Too bad your president's as stubborn as her captain. Uehara Shiraha said as he picked up Kusaka Yachiru and parked her in the front seat. It was fine, though. It didn't stop her from being the mascot president. Then, Uehara Shiraha picked up a piece of konpito and popped it in his mouth, right in front of Kusaka Yachiru. Not bad, actually. Pretty sweet. The three girl disciples just stared, speechless. Finally, Ayase Nanao, the vice president of the Female Soul Reaper Association, used her spirit power to unfreeze Kusaka Yachiru. The pink-haired loli was still fuming, but Uehara Shiraha stopped her with one sentence. If you don't eat it, all the candy's gonna be gone. Hearing that, Kusaka Yachiru turned her fury into hunger and started gobbling down candy like there was no tomorrow. A little later, the graceful and elegant Unohana Retsu walked in and took a seat. As the chairman of the Female Soul Reaper Association, she came to the monthly meetings, but Uehara Shiraha figured the first Kenpachi was mostly just looking for something to do. From start to finish, the Yamato Nadeshiko-like beauty was perfectly composed, but inside, Unohana Retsu was anything but calm. She could tell that yesterday's fight had definitely loosened Zaraki Kenpachi's restraints. That was a good thing. At the same time, she was getting more and more curious about what it would be like to fight Uehara Shiraha. Last to show up was the busty and energetic blonde, Matsumoto Ranjaku. Among all the beauties, Uehara Bayu, the only guy, stood out, but whether it was the sweet and innocent Rukia and Momo Hinamori, or the slightly clingy Matsumoto Ranjaku, Uehara Bayu handled it all without breaking a sweat. For him, this was just a walk in the park. After a while of eating and chatting, the monthly routine was over. Uehara Bayu first gave Rukia and Momo Hinamori some homework. Even though they were already officers in the Gotei 13, they were still basically high school kids in human terms, so they had a lot to learn. Uehara Bayu took his job seriously. He couldn't let those two get themselves killed, and he firmly turned down Matsumoto Ranjaku's offer for a drink. He had important stuff to do that night, and women only slowed him down. Back in his secret base under Sokayaku Hill, Uehara Bayu was grinding through his basic training. After finishing his daily tasks, he got his attribute point rewards, Flash Step +1, Shadow Clone +1. Not only could his captain level Flash Step keep improving, but even his perfection level Shadow Clone could still be leveled up. Above captain level Flash Step was transcendent level Flash Step. But that was a realm a pure Soul Reaper couldn't reach. Even among captain-level Flash Steps, there were different levels of mastery. Still, no matter how good a Soul Reaper's Flash Step was, it couldn't break the limits of the Soul Reaper race. Same went for spiritual pressure, sword skills, spirit techniques, and hand-to-hand combat. That was the limit of Soul Reapers. Right now, Uehara Bayu's Flash Step was still a ways from that limit, and his perfection-level Shadow Clone was already maxed out in the conventional sense. Now, he could create a Shadow Clone with a thought. He could basically snap his fingers and get one. Plus, he could make up to 20 Shadow Clones for grinding practice. He was using regular Shadow Clones to achieve the effect of the forbidden multiple Shadow Clone technique. His practice efficiency had skyrocketed, which meant Uehara Bayu could improve his skills and get stronger faster. He knew all the ins and outs of the Shadow Clone technique. But a Shadow Clone at that level couldn't get any stronger through practice, because Uehara Bayu had already pushed all aspects of that ninjutsu to the absolute limit, but system points could break the rules. Even if there was no room for improvement, the points the system added to the Shadow Clone wouldn't be wasted. He figured if he added a few hundred more points, the Shadow Clone should be able to transform into a real multiple Shadow Clone technique. Then, if he made hundreds of Shadow Clones to practice every day, his strength would skyrocket. That was the power of attribute points, turning something ordinary into something extraordinary, and letting abilities break through their limits. For example, an active skill like Universal Barrier could become a passive skill, or even be reversed and used as the power to sever all things. His stand, White Album, could evolve into something terrifying, like White Album Requiem. Basically, the more attribute points, the better. Then, Uehara Bayu flipped his right hand, and a yellow gem appeared, the SR level Mind Gem, a famous infinity gem from the MCU. was his secret weapon for crushing those overpowered bodyguards. Uehara Baiyu used his spiritual pressure to connect with the gem. In an instant, countless scenes flashed before his eyes, and many voices filled his ears. I want to get stronger. I want to be Uehara-sama's sharpest blade. Abarai-senpai is so strong. I want to follow in his footsteps. The 11th Division's too dangerous. I want to go to the 4th Division after graduation. Mr. Uehara, I want to draw. Uehara Baiyu focused and calmed himself, ignoring the weirdness. He knew the mind gem was connecting him to the minds of others. Those scenes must be fragments of their dreams, and those voices were their deepest desires. Uehara Baiyu tested it out and found he could only slightly read and influence the consciousness of those people. Partly because he hadn't fully developed the mind gem, and partly because of the distance, but it was still terrifying. See, Soul Reapers Zanpakuto actually had their own minds. That was why some Zanpakuto wouldn't accept their owners and could even be turned against them. If Uehara Baiyu developed the mind gem to its full potential, it would be like an enhanced version of the demon sword Muramasa. He could even control the complete Hogyoku and easily become immortal. After all, the Hogyoku and the Soul King fragments were self-aware. Uehara Baiyu activated the mind gem again, and the scenery in front of him changed. But this was different. The real world now seemed like a canvas. With the mind gem's power, he could mess with it, add and subtract scenes and characters, and those scenes and characters were so real, you couldn't tell them from the genuine article. It was like Aizen's Kyoka Suigetsu, consciousness link, illusion creation, minor consciousness control. Uehara Baiyu had barely started, and he already had 3 abilities, all of which directly affected thinking and perception. That was incredibly dangerous. Almost everyone in the Soul Reaper and Quincy armies was a glass cannon. If their minds were messed with, they were helpless. Even the Soul King's omniscience and omnipotence had to be used actively to change the future. Thinking that, Uehara Baiyu put the mind gem into the subspace. Developing it was a long process, but he could use shadow clones to use the mind gem over and over again. That would give him some experience. Uehara Baiyu was very happy with the mind gem's power. At the very least, it was a pseudo-Soul King level treasure. Once he got familiar with those 3 abilities, he wouldn't have to worry about the Holy Body Miracle or the Pretender. Leobaro, as Uehara Baiyu was thinking, a lithe purple figure suddenly appeared behind him and launched a kick. The air exploded, and spiritual pressure condensed into a blade that could cut through anything. But Uehara Baiyu's figure blurred, and the attack went wide. When he reappeared, he was behind the figure, throwing a punch with all his might. But after the punch, Uehara Baiyu paused, confused. The feeling wasn't right. Sure enough, all that was left was a set of purple clothes, the Shihoin clan's unique secret technique, the advanced flash step, Shuunpa. Uehara Baiyu whirled around, ready to fight back. A clear voice came from above, I'm here. Before she finished speaking, a tan beauty with a purple ponytail dropped from the sky, kicking Uehara Shiraha in the shoulder. Got you. But the next second, the Uehara Shiraha she'd kicked turned into smoke. Uehara Shiraha, now at a distance, had already put on his death gloves, focusing his spiritual pressure into them. Buzz! The ordinary gloves instantly turned into silver-white steel gauntlets. After absorbing several Shihoin clan's magical tools, the death gloves had been upgraded to A rank, unlocking their magic weapon mode. In this mode, they could release invisible flames and split into spirit whips. The current death gloves were flashier, cooler, and more eye-catching than before. Uehara Baiyu's right hand, wearing the death gloves, twitched slightly. 7 flashes. Danger! The moment Uehara Baiyu's right hand moved, Shihoin Yoruchi reacted like a startled cat. She flashed, about to escape, but the rocks around her instantly shattered, as if cut by invisible blades. The 7 spirit whips sliced through the rocks and twisted into 6 solid energy shards, binding Shihoin Yoruchi tightly. Binding technique 61, 6 staff light restraint. Shihoin Yoruchi was now like a sexy kitten tied up with rope. After a little struggle, she gave up. She knew this move and couldn't break free that easily. She sighed. Your secret techniques are no fun. You wouldn't be at a disadvantage if you just used hand-to-hand combat, you know. Thought if it was just a Zanpakuto duel, she'd enjoy it more. Chapter 60. You are listening at novelfull.audio. But as long as Uehara Baiyu used his weird tricks, all she could do was take the hits, whether it was the clone jutsu that made it impossible to tell what was real or the invisible slash that felt like some kind of ghost magic, she was defenseless. It was straight up unfair. Seeing Yoruichi Shihoin concede, Uehara Baiyu released her bonds, raising an eyebrow. I've told you before, don't go all in when you're facing a tough opponent. Always leave yourself an out. Yoruichi Shihoin's fighting style was a little too reckless. Even though she was known as the Flash Goddess, she loved close-quarters combat and unleashing combos. When she faced an enemy, she always tried to find a combo that would finish them off, focusing on efficiency and trying to subdue them with minimal effort. This worked great against weaker opponents. It saved energy and spiritual pressure. But it could be a major disadvantage against an unknown master. For instance, in the storyline, when Yoruichi Shihoin fought the Espada Yami, she immediately launched a combo. Yami barely suffered any damage, while Yoruichi ended up with an arm injury from Yami's tough hide. That was because Yoruichi Shihoin underestimated the Arrancar's strength and didn't immediately activate her Shunkai. Easy for you to say, Yoruichi Shihoin replied, unconvinced. How could she break habits she developed over years of fighting? Besides, the real reason she lost so easily was because he was just too strong. Yoruichi Shihoin had been tripped up by his strange techniques too many times, and she still couldn't figure them out. It was as ridiculous as Aizen's Kyoka Suigetsu. The guy in front of her was crazy strong, and every time she remembered how young he was, Yoruichi Shihoin was floored. When she first found out Otsutsuki Naruto's real identity, she thought someone was playing a prank. Thinking about it, Yoruichi Shihoin looked at Uehara Baiyu again, an odd, almost moist glimmer in her eyes. To have such unpredictable power at barely 100 years old. It was hard to believe that this monster came from the streets of Rukongai. Could this guy be the secret heir of some big Rukongai family? Otherwise, how could he have more tricks up his sleeve and be stronger than her, the heir of a great noble clan? Uehara Baiyu wasn't bothering with the disguise glasses. They knew each other too well. There was no point in hiding, and he was sure he had Shihoin Yoruichi and Uehara Kisuke under control. No accidents were possible. In this version, before the transcendent beings revealed themselves, he didn't have to worry much, given his power. Noticing Shihoin Yoruichi's stare, Uehara Baiyu casually said, "So, did you have any luck with the Karakura town Batman?" Over the years, he had squeezed a lot out of Uehara Kisuke. The guy was just a tool. He got tons of cool stuff from Uehara's gadget shop. In exchange, Uehara Shiraha let the West Rukongai army turn a blind eye to certain illegal activities. That place was Uehara Kisuke's main base and supply route in the Soul Society. Shihoin Yoruichi was used to Uehara Shiraha's weird nicknames. She nodded. I brought the space stabilization equipment you wanted. Where's the intel we need? What's Aizen's Kyoka Suigetsu's weakness? That she pulled out the sealed equipment and handed it to Uehara Baiyu, looking at him expectantly. She and Uehara Baiyu had started out with a simple business arrangement. He was so mysterious that she wanted to know more. After a few deals, she was hooked, and the guy in front of her was pretty much a perfect lover, though that's another story. The main point was that if they wanted to take down Aizen, they needed to crack Kyoka Suigetsu first. Shihoin Yoruichi was pissed at being played for so long by Aizen's mind games, but that bastard Aizen was too cautious and secretive. She hadn't found any clues to crack Kyoka Suigetsu over the years, so she was putting all her eggs in Uehara Baiyu's basket. Uehara Baiyu knew a lot about Kyoka Suigetsu. Since he was getting something out of it, he didn't mind making things harder for Aizen. He pointed out, actually, Kyoka Suigetsu isn't unbeatable. It just seems that way because Aizen's so strong. Still, even Aizen's Kyoka Suigetsu leaves a trace. Kyoka Suigetsu's power is only controlling the 5 senses, not changing what someone fundamentally knows. So the user has to manually adjust all the details. To replace someone else's appearance, you only need to tweak the spiritual pressure, voice, smell, body shape, clothing, and weapons slightly, but to conjure a living person out of thin air. That's a big job. It's hard to get every detail right, so if you pay attention to that, you can get a general idea of where Aizen is. Also, anyone who's been hit by Kyoka Suigetsu will become immune to its effects if they hold the physical blade. During the 1000-Year Blood War, Aizen used Kyoka Suigetsu to look like Kurosaki Ichigo and trick Yawatch, but he took all the hits himself, not even a glancing blow. just to make the illusion convincing, not to mention dealing with the Soul King Ha. Even when he was messing with the captains, Aizen was super careful and wouldn't just conjure up someone out of thin air. After all, the captains were pretty sharp. Trying to pull a fast one on them was an insult to their intelligence. Except for Hitsugaya Toshiro, Aizen never insulted the captains that way. I see. Getting the key information, Shihoin Yoruchi's eyes flashed. She clenched her fists, regaining her confidence. Sooner or later, I'm going to make that four-eyed jerk pay. The nightmare that had been hanging over her for so long eased up, and she felt relieved. Sure enough, this guy was reliable and could even get intel like this. She stretched, showing off her curves, and said lazily, I'm beat. I could really use a hot spring. You mind? Not at all. I've got some good sake. Want to join me? Uehara Baiyu easily pulled out a bottle and glasses. Sure. A smile lit up Yoruchi's eyes. While Yoruchi Shihoin and Uehara Shiraha were happily drinking and soaking, Aizen was in Hueco Mundo, staring toward the Imperial Army's base. He used to think of this base and its owner as a joke. After all, he had taken over Hueco Mundo and was doing all kinds of crazy experiments, and these guys didn't even notice. What was that, if not a joke? But now, he was having second thoughts. Behind him, Ikemara Jin and Tozen Kaname stood quietly. Ikemara Jin squinted his eyes and said, never thought my old classmate was so powerful. A Bankai that can freeze the world. My Kamishini no Yari can't compare. He really wanted to know what Aizen thought of Uehara Shiraha, but Aizen was excellent at hiding his inner thoughts and extremely perceptive, so Ikemara Jin was forced to be indirect. Tozen Kaname calmly said, no matter how talented he is, he's only a Shinigami who hasn't even lived a century. His current strength is no threat to our vision of justice. If necessary, I'll personally eliminate the problem for you, Aizen-sama. Aizen's expression was steady, but his eyes glinted. If you keep thinking that way, you'll get burned. Uehara Shiraha showed some serious power in his fight with Zaraki Kenpachi, but that wasn't the full extent of it. He was still hiding something. Aizen knew that most people probably thought that powerful Bankai was the limit for Uehara Shiraha. Even the captains might be fooled and miss the truth, but Aizen had known for a long time that Uehara Shiraha was stronger than that. That's why he had said, admiration is the emotion furthest from understanding. Only someone with power far beyond everyone else could feel that way. Aizen knew this well. Of course, Aizen-sama. Tozen was shocked. He didn't doubt Aizen's judgment, but he was still surprised. Ikemaru's snake-like face also twitched, but he recovered quickly and sighed. Seems my old classmate is pretty good at keeping secrets. Spooky. Maybe. Aizen glanced at Ikemara Jin, his expression hard to read, and asked, Jin, do you think Otsutsuki Naruto is Uehara Shiraha? Ikemara Jin was taken aback. That's unlikely. Their abilities and goals don't seem related at all. Tozen Kaname added, every time Otsutsuki Naruto showed up, we checked. Uehara Shiraha was never a suspect. Every time, he happened to have a solid alibi, just like my Kyoka Suigetsu, airtight. Aizen went on. Before, we thought Uehara Shiraha's actions were just coincidences, whether it was the Imperial Army or the Hueco Mundo base, all random, and he never messed with our plans or posed any kind of threat. But is that really true? Now Aizen understood why Uehara Shiraha always acted so reasonably and naturally around him, so reasonable and natural that it was almost annoying. This. Tozen Kaname and Ikemara Jin were genuinely surprised and even shivered slightly. If everything was as Aizen said, then this Uehara Shiraha was way too scary. He was practically Aizen 2.0. Aizen's lips curled. It's getting more interesting by the minute. The next morning, Uehara Shiraha was doing a tour of the Imperial Army's territory. He was refreshed and full of energy. Sometimes, a little relaxation was just what you needed. Behind him, Se Nanao, clutching a thick book, reported, Commander-in-Chief, we've checked all the Siriidii bases. Any thoughts? She got out a pen, ready to take notes. Commander-in-Chief Uehara Shiraha had been instrumental in building the Siriidii army into a force that mattered in Hueco Mundo, Rukongai, and Siriidii. A quick tip from Uehara Shiraha was usually enough to make the Siriidii army get a lot stronger, fast. Uehara Shiraha shrugged. The Siriidii soldiers are just rich kids playing army, like a ceremonial guard. They might not be tough, but they can't lose their noble heirs. With the nobles and the Godii 13 around, it was hard for the imperial army to meddle in Soul Society affairs. Even decent nobles weren't going to join the imperial army, so Uehara Shiraha only rounded up some of the minor nobles. These people were the face of the imperial army, and they were there to reassure the nobles who were on the fence. Uehara Shiraha also knew that numbers weren't everything. High-level fighters were more useful. A one-man army was where it was at, so, from the jump, he didn't expect the imperial army to provide much military strength. Uehara Shiraha built the imperial army to make it easier to get stronger and enjoy life. Understood. Ise Nanao scribbled down the key points. After a quick walk, the two got to the East Rukongai base. As soon as he entered, Uehara Bayu was greeted warmly by a group of soldiers. The base commander, Captain Kanazawa of the East Rukongai team, was excited. The East Rukongai division of the Imperial Army welcomes Commander-in-Chief Uehara. Uehara Bayu nodded, walked into the base, and saw a gaudy human statue. The statue was of Uehara Bayu himself. He was surprised. What's this about? The local resident sent it, Kanazawa explained quickly. Since the Imperial Army had been stationed in East Rukongai, the local blocks were safer. Attacks in East Rukongai had dropped significantly. To thank Uehara Bayu, the locals pooled their money to make this statue. What a waste. Don't do this again, Uehara Bayu said, looking honest and upright. But you could switch out the eyes for black gemstones later. That would make it more lifelike. Kanazawa nodded, committing it to memory. Ise Nanao sighed, looking helpless. When Uehara Bayu and Kanazawa were talking, the soldiers around them knelt, full of respect, not daring to breathe. Only a few were official Shinigami. The vast majority were civilians who had been starving in the dangerous backwater areas. These people had a little spiritual talent, but not enough to become Shinigami. They were basically waiting to die. The Imperial Army had saved them. After Uehara Bayu left, they stood up, excited and enthusiastic. General Uehara is so hot. Thanks to him, we Rukongai ants can keep on living. I'd die happy to serve such a strong commander. They say our treatment is better than the official Shinigami in the Godii 13. I'll follow Commander Uehara to the death. Soon, Uehara Shiraha was at the base's captain's office. He wanted to learn a bit about the base's progress. The bigwigs didn't care much about Rukongai and its residents. That's why the Imperial Army was able to grow here. Kanazawa gave a detailed report. She and Shuhei Hisagi had been classmates. In a simulated combat exercise, they were attacked by a giant hollow. Uehara Shiraha's apprentice, Hinamori Momo, stepped in and saved her. Because of that, Kanazawa joined the Imperial Army after graduating and became the captain of the Rukongai division, so she had a lot of respect for Uehara Shiraha.